are live. Come one, come all. Nothing but love, nothing but respect. You know what we do, what we don't, what we isn't, and what we is here today. Bringing you guys and girls One Piece chapter 1073 live discussion. I got with me today the lovely, the glorious Eggs for Brekkie and Kuma. Say hello, lads.
Hello, lads.
Hello. So this was a freaking amazing chapter. Ooh. Apparently the audio for this chapter, for the stream isn't working. Glitter, if you're in the chat, let us know if you can hear our audio or not. It seems like the bitrate coming through is lower than recommended. See, this is why we always have a few minutes at the beginning of the stream to make sure everything's working fine. Well, it says it's good now, but Glitter, let us know if it's working. This was a goddamn ball busting chapter, like a chef
I
kiss.
am pretty blown away.
Oh, when I in my live stream, I came across a image of the Gorosei and their supposed naming scheme, and when I sent that to Eggs, like the response I got was essentially just like, okay, you may have a point that Oda meticulously plans everything if this was the case, because for 20 years he's been sitting on a very obvious naming scheme for the Gorosei, yet at the same time it's like so game changing, and it's just like, it's Oda, man. It's just like, why? How can you put in that much thought on it and stay so
honest,
consistent?
Like, I totally buy the idea that it could be all of the names are based off of like different planets in the solar system. I think that would make a lot of sense. What I think is much more unlikely though is that picture that you sent me where like in that exact frame the names are like exactly categorized based on the distance from the sun. Because to me that would be too far. Like,
I mean,
that turns out to be true. That's like too far.
well, I would say at that point in time, that when they were introduced was freshly when Pluton was introduced. So it would have been when Oda first came up with the whole concept of the ancient weapons and that whole aspect of the story. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, I mean, this was literally like within like a handful of chapters after. So if he was going to have been thinking about it at any point in time and putting those like little hints in, it would have been like right then and there. You know what I mean? And if he decided to put to come up with that naming scheme for them back then, and he's just been sitting on waiting for a good time to reveal one of their names, it is both like really meticulous, but it's also one of those things where it's just like, honestly, I've seen him do crazier stuff in the story.
Well, the thing is that if that picture is true and all of that order is like perfectly the distances from the sun, then that would imply that he had Sun God Nika planned out since back then.
Well, it would be
I
really
think
interesting.
Even less likely.
Well, it would be really interesting considering he's always known how the story was going to end, and Sun God Nika, the concept of him was introduced the very next arc after those Gorosei were introduced. So, like,
I don't know how you can write a story and just like sit on that for so long.
I mean,
imagine like showing off like before, and everyone's like getting so all the viewers are getting so hyped about it, and you're just sitting there like, you guys don't even know. You don't even know what
that's the thing though. He's always like stalling that out, and like I said,
never sit on it for that long. I would just like that. I think if I was trying to write something, that would be my biggest weakness. Was I would just
spoiling it,
all the information. Yeah, soon as I thought of a cool concept, I would just be like, yeah, people need to know. Like,
mind you though, this is the problem with modern shonen. Like, I know for me, I've just spent the day doing my reactions that'll release this week on the channel for like My Hero and Black Clover, and I'm not going to spoil anything for them, but like when I'm doing a reaction to those chapters, not only does it feel way shorter than a One Piece chapter, even if they are the same length at times, right? Because just One Piece just packs so much more into it, but the storytelling, it's like every chapter, it's like something gets set up and then it immediately gets resolved. There's never breathing time and stuff like that. So I feel like Oda having the skill to be like, I'm going to set this up. And do you know what? I reckon there's probably more plot lines that he's set up that he's never paid off and never going to pay off than there are plot lines that he's just pulled out of thin air on the day. If that makes sense. Like, there's probably more things that he's set up, and then he goes, do you know what? In hindsight, that's probably not the best plot line. I'm going to drop it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, like, the way I read it, it's like, when you look, like, when you zoom out, and I know I keep saying when you zoom out and look at One Piece as a whole, right? When he introduces these concepts, he ends up introducing every aspect connected to that concept all at once, and he'll start it, and then he'll leave it for a couple of arcs. And then he'll come back to it, and then all those same characters and same elements all of a sudden come back into the story. And, like, pre-timeskip, we would look at that and be like, oh, you know, it's just this background narrative that's building and building and building. But really, it's just like, when Oda goes, oh, I got to think about this plotline now, he focuses on that plotline and everything that's connected to it. And we just don't know they're connected until all of a sudden the payoff comes out, and it's like, oh, that's all connected.
That's the thing as well, is that, like, the dots never connect for us until they're all fully connected and like, you know, the line has ended. Like, it's never like we connect the dots and then we go, oh, so now this is going to happen, and then it happens exactly how we predict. It's always like after it's all finished, like the last little tidbit of information that he drops, and then somebody goes back and connects all of the dots, and then it's like, oh, this was connected from the start. But then it's never like, oh, and because of that, now we know this is going to happen, because that thing never actually ends up happening.
It makes it better for a reread, but the first, like I don't know about you guys. I did a video on
Still
this.
Can't predict the future though.
I did a video on this through the week, right? Where it was like one of those crazy things where it was like, there are 4 types of One Piece watchers. People that are anime only, people that are manga only, people that caught up on the anime and then just couldn't wait a second more, and then just caught up on the manga, and then people that have to read the manga every week when it comes out, or the spoilers even. Watch the anime, even though it's a year behind and they know everything that's going to happen. Play all the games, read all the data books and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, people tend to fall into one of the 4 of those categories. And it's funny how Oda writes equally for all of those people, right? Like, the first time you read through One Piece, you're like, oh, this is just like a fun story and it's really cool. You know what I mean? And then on a reread, it's like, oh shit, look at all this foreshadowing and stuff like that. That's freaking wild. And then on a reread, you're like, oh shit, was this setting up this, this, and this? Oh, I didn't even realize this until chapter 1000 and something comes out where all of a sudden it's like, it recontextualizes something in like chapter 30. And it's like, why? Who planned this like meticulously? And who waits out, like, dude, I know we just got through saying it, but it's like, I genuinely could not sit on a plot line like that for that long. And it's funny because, like, people say it's actually a downside of Oda's in a way, where it's like, you know, Oda's got the silhouette no me, where, like, characters will stay in silhouette for bloody 10, 20 years, and it's just like, just show us who they are. We just want to see them. But then we see them, and it's like, oh, if we had seen what that character looked like in a weird enough way, we could have predicted a whole lot about their character, because just based on how they look, you can reference it with so many other, like, real world people or plot lines or theories or ideas. Like, freaking Vegapunk. You know what I mean? Looking like Einstein, but, like, not just Einstein being linked to, like, you know, Tesla and to Isaac Newton and stuff like that. It's just like all those crazy little things that you can just start nitpicking together and, like, daisy chaining together. And I feel like this chapter really ends with one of those moments where it's not confirmed yet, but if we get one more Gorosei member introduced and they follow the naming scheme, it's as good as confirmed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if that's the case, it's like, you got to sit back and you got to be like, shit, okay, you planned this.
It's also really interesting that, like, people that read week to week and pay attention to the chapter numbers and all those, like, crazy things that Oda always does with the chapter numbers and theming them together and stuff. Like, you know, like, oh, this number, you know, 100 chapters ago was the same scene, but in a different way. Like, people that just read through, once the season's completely over, once the story's completely over, and they just read through the whole series, will never have that experience. It's like a very unique experience to people who read it week to week and then check out some, like, you know, Twitter posts or something about it as well, or have a friend that tells them and stuff. Like,
it's very like unique experience going through it
Yep.
as anyone else. You know, you could get your kids into it in 15 years when the series is long over, and they could read through and watch through the entire series and be really into it. They wouldn't get those references unless you like told them or they looked it up online
Which
somewhere.
actually almost makes it sad because it's like one day this will stop being a week to week story. And when this stops being a week to week story,
It'll
people-
only have the merit of a full read through.
and when people
That's the thing is, the full read through binge or the full watch through binge is the legacy of the show,
yeah,
right? The week to week reading it and talking about it,
the theorizing,
the
the power
current-
scaling, the meta.
that's like the current fan base. But like the legacy of the show is because I mean I guarantee you like once One Piece is finished, it's still going to be in one of the more popular anime to watch like for ages. Like you know how
Oh,
like Naruto Shippuden is still like one of the more popular anime to watch on a lot of the anime like watching websites because people are just like re-watching through it or watching through it for the first time in bulk. And like once One Piece is done, it's still going to be one of the most popular animes or manga, but it'll just be like it'll be people that are reading it or watching it will have a whole different experience to what we are.
I honestly
now.
think it'll be like it'll be both the like I feel like when it's all finished, people say it's like one of the best modern stories ever written, but at the same time, they won't understand half of the complexity of it because I mean even us and I'll get into this a little bit later, even us as Western audience readers miss I would say a good 50% of the references in One Piece. And we still like meticulously go over it, you know what I mean? Like just being a native Japanese reader, like the whole laugh tale raftel thing just being like it's been hard translated for us for years, whereas it's always been the same way where it could be read either way in the Japanese, and it just completely depended on the fact that you can read it multiple ways, you know what I mean?
Yes.
The same can be said, and I'll reference it for this chapter here. The Gorosei, the 5 elder stars, can also be read as the 5 elder planets because the word, the kanji used, can be synonymous with either star or planet. So calling them the 5 elder planets would make sense with, you know, Mercury, Venus, all that sort of stuff. How it seems like they're named after. You know what I mean? So a Japanese reader could have potentially theorized and could have potentially predicted that. It's just highly unlikely. Whereas for us, because of that, like loss in translation, as good as it is, it's still one of those things where it's just like we didn't have a hope in that regard for it. But I really feel for people that when the series is done and finished, first things first, there will be a day where you can get spoiled for you what the One Piece is. And if you haven't gotten up to date by that point, I actually fear for your enjoyment of the series overall, because the enjoyment of not knowing what it is and actually genuinely experiencing an authentic journey with these characters is something completely different to just knowing something is going to happen eventually. Like it's bad enough now when something gets spoiled for you and you continue through and you're like, oh yeah, I knew that was going to happen. It was good, but you know, you're still new. Imagine that with the entire climax of this story. Because One Piece's, I would argue, best aspect is its storytelling and mysteries, as opposed to anything else in the story.
Yeah.
So having those mysteries like ruined for you would be just, you know, devastating.
Yeah.
To me.
I feel like
No, you go.
okay. Yeah, no, it's just I feel that a lot of what writers, well, at least modern writers nowadays forget is that in order for, I guess, mystery to succeed, there also has to be a certain amount of time that you wait before you actually sell it, you know, because
Breathing room.
mystery benefits from time. Like there's no other way around it, because when you're building up a plot that nobody knows, you might just end up like this. It's kind of like how do I put it, like going on a drive, I guess, for like 4 hours to a destination, right? But instead you cut that down to 10 minutes instead. It's kind of like going from point A to point B and just getting smacked with the fact.
It's like the difference between seeing something in real life, like getting on a train, catching a plane, going overseas, and going to a destination, and then seeing a photo of it. right?
Mhm.
It's the difference between like reading Agatha Christie's Poirot and like you've got like a Bible thick book, right? And it's all a mystery that you got to try and piece clues together, versus a like 20-page comic strip of a mystery that you solve in 3 pages. You know what I mean? It's like that breathing room changes how much you enjoy that story and how impactful that mystery is by a significant amount. Like, if I'm thinking of mysteries, it's stuff like The Departed. The way The Departed ends. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie, but because the ending comes out of nowhere and it's set up, but it was so mysterious in a weird way, makes that movie so much better to me, as opposed to just a long drawn out story. And yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, one day the One Piece will be spoiled, and therefore you can be spoiled on the One Piece is. One day the week to week reading will stop, which means, and I don't know about you guys and girls, but most people I know, when they watch a series or read a series in bulk, they don't actually take the time to like detail pick. Like, I feel like, even with One Piece, right? How many of us watched One Piece for the first time instead of reading it? Whether it was on like Toonami or whatever as a kid, right? Toasted TV or whatever. You would watch it and you just enjoy it for what it is, right? But then you go back and you start reading it one day when you're older, and then you start picking up on these like narrative through lines and stuff like that you didn't pick up as a kid. And it's like, it's the difference between being younger to older and also like just consuming something in bulk and not having to wait for an answer, as opposed to you've got to sit back and you've actually got to think for yourself and go, I wonder what will happen. I wonder how this will be. You know what I mean? Which actually ties in pretty well to the beginning, to the end of this chapter. I'll circle around back to that, but we're almost 20 minutes in, so we should actually start talking about this chapter, I think.
Yes.
So, on the cover, we've got German 66's Cold-Blooded Voyage, Volume 29. I'm going to keep rubbing in your face, Daniel, that the cover series has continued well and truly past
Jesus Christ,
the Vince
keeps
Smoke
going,
getting back.
doesn't it?
Dude,
It's the same one. They could have just changed the name to
the Mads cover story.
yeah,
No,
to the
no,
Mad
no,
cover
no, you can't
story.
Well,
do that.
Because it's not German 66 anymore.
I think it actually could end.
It's gonna link back.
It could end with the reunion of Mads, but without Vegapunk. Because Judge and Caesar are together at the moment, right? And we know they're somewhat near, like they're in the New World, right?
Yeah.
Queen got defeated by Green Bull, but we never saw Green Bull take away a body.
Yeah, that was kind of
So,
weird.
depending on what happens, we could actually see a reunion with Judge, Caesar, and Queen, and it could almost be like a battle to see who's the best scientist out of the 3 of them to like reform Mads in some capacity. Even if it's like evil Mads, if that makes sense. So they could end up becoming, say, like the generals of the Germa Kingdom in some capacity now, or Germa's Special Science Division or
I
something.
mean, now from this one, we even found out that Buckham was like, we'll confirm that Buckham was a part of the Mads, even if she was like a crash.
She was a self-celebrated.
Yeah.
Look,
But like, it could even be that like this ends up with basically all of them meeting on Sphinx Island, and they all basically get together.
It could. Let's get through this then, because we'll circle back to that, I reckon. Apart from that though, we officially get like a fill-in for the Nobel Peace Prize in One Piece. So there's the Ibel Peace Prize, and Vegapunk creates gunpowder that seeds new flora, which actually is a ridiculously crazy weapon. Because imagine him using this in say Alabaster. You know what I mean? The fact that you can like reseed crops and stuff like that with gunpowder, meaning every like it's essentially the cool thing that Green Bull did on his introduction in Wano, going through Kuri, where he just reseeded everything. So I find that really, really impressive in a weird way. But I feel like the fact that this already exists and seems like it happened like 20, 30 years ago, it actually has me a little upset that we haven't seen it in some capacity used by the world government after a war. I know that might be like a random thing, but it's like I feel like that could be something to like have like the world's perspective of the world government be like a little less damaging, where it's like we had this terrible war, but don't worry, we're gonna make it better after. You know what I mean?
And that's the thing, like it would actually be cool from like a world building side to see, like, for example, like some of the Navy bases will like save up a bunch of their budget to buy a piece of Mad's tech or a piece of Vegapunk's tech to like, like an air conditioning system for the base in like a base that's just off the coast of a desert island. So it's like a really hot base, or like just something like that, like a piece of tech that's just like helpful.
Yeah.
Not like a war tech, but just a helpful thing. And obviously, like they don't get much budget that doesn't go towards war, and they could play it off like that. Like that's why his technology isn't all over the place. Obviously, is because the world government only cares about power and domination and all that crazy shit. So it's like basically, if you want to buy this tech, then you have to save up an insane amount of money. And so the only people that can really do that are like super rich kingdoms or like bases, like navy bases, if they save some of their budget for it.
It would be really impressive, and it actually almost begs the question, because we know like dance powder is illegal, but I wonder if the world government actually like confiscates this technology and makes it illegal under some bogus situation if we don't get to see it in the future, for them to monopolize the use of it in certain circumstances for themselves. Otherwise, I feel like any government, like any country part of the world government, right, would be able to utilize stuff like this in a weird way. Like, I know this sounds dumb, but like the Gao Kingdom, Goa Kingdom, right? Luffy's home village. They burnt down Great Terminal. They could have burnt down Great Terminal and reseeded it with this stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, like even just thinking about like having Green Bull, like basically if you just had that fruit, because they just gave him the fruit kind of recently, right? Which means they just
we don't know
on that fruit.
We don't know about that. We don't know.
They could have found it recently.
We don't know if him or Fujitora have had their fruit for a long time. There's implications that Fuji's fruit was new, but the implications are just as equal that it's not the fruit that's new, but him having to look after civilians as a Navy admiral and not prioritize himself, if that makes sense. Like, pretty much like we have.
Although I would say that Fuji's a nice enough guy that he would be looking after. He wouldn't just be slaughtering towns. Like,
yes, but he may not be worried about collateral damage, and that he may have been just on his own.
Yeah, like on a deserted island.
Well, he could have been more like a Mihawk, like a free agent. You know what I mean? Because like the reason why a lot of us sort of believe that his fruit was new is there's a moment where he's using his devil fruit to bring down a meteor, and like his guard's like, you can't do that, there's like buildings and civilians around it, and he's like, oh shit, and then stops it, and he's like, yeah, I haven't really gotten the hang of this yet. So you could read that as like he hasn't gotten the hang of using his powers to not be super destructive, and therefore his powers are new.
He's going to use his position.
Yeah, because I mean, like, if you don't work for anyone and you've got no accountability to be held, like, you've got no higher authority to be held accountable to, dropping a meteor on a town to stop a bad guy, they might just be like, thanks for stopping the bad guy, even though the town's totaled. You know what I mean? Like, it's One Piece weird logic with that. But it could be either way. Like, there's no right or wrong in that. It's just not confirmed hard. If
It is what it is.
Yeah. That being said, before we move past this,
Anyway, yeah. What I was saying with Green Bull was like basically they could just, whoever has Green Bull's fruit doesn't even have to be a strong Haki user or anything. They could literally just get on a ship and just sail around to cities, to countries, and just like give them a bloom of like, hey, you've been starving because some drought came through your kingdom and now you don't have any crops. Here, I'll just instantly give you a bunch of crops. And then he could basically like have people pay him insane amounts of money to go essentially save them all from starvation. You know, like we can't afford to just like import an entire town's worth of food through the winter, but our crops got stuffed up this spring, so we need food. And then he just goes, pay me almost as much money and I will come over and just give you food.
Before we move on, just 1 second, I'm getting a little bit of feedback from your mic when you're talking, Daniel. I don't know if it's like an air conditioner or something. But just doubling on that, yeah, dude, imagine the war relief effort of Aokiji and Green Bull if Aokiji never left the Marines, right? Where they go to a town and Aokiji just shoots off a pheasant beak and creates a water stream that it'll slowly melt over time, so he can provide a country with water relief, and then Green Bull repopulates and reseeds it, altering the climate for that country for the better going forward. You know what I mean? Even Akainu in like creating land masses and stuff like that. Like the agricultural and commerce of the world of One Piece should be so much more than what it is based on some of these powers. But then again, that could also be because Im tries to keep control by dividing and keeping the populace and masses in lower, in less than suitable living conditions for the most part. You know what I mean? That being said as well, right, I love how... Is it weird that this chapter makes Mads look younger than they did last chapter? Like, Caesar looks like a 14-year-old Farquaad kid.
Yeah.
Like, and it actually kind of leaves me to, it kind of leads me to question, right? Yeah, okay, so chat's still saying we're getting a bit of feedback. I can try and drop the volume and see if that's better. Oh no, it stopped. Alright. Yeah, so looking at Caesar, you know how he's got the goat horns?
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys remember the goats or the goat horned people from Skypiea?
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
How's it now?
That is better.
No, because my mic's kind of a wild mess.
Nah, fair enough. So, you know the goat horned people from Skypiea? Do you remember them at all?
No, not really.
No? So, NL had a private guard of, like, holy warriors that were all just goat horned. Like, normal dudes with goat horns, right? Caesar's got the same thing. I'm wondering if, because we've never actually seen what a half mink looks like. I'm wondering if maybe a half mink just for some reason only develops goat horns. Otherwise that's a really odd genetic manipulation for like a fair group of people to have that just never gets addressed in a weird way. You know what I mean? That being said, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this chapter. So we pick up with Kaku KO'd on the floor. He's been low-diffed by Stussy last chapter. Rob Gucci looking shook as shit. Stussy finesses him with the slip, right? And do you have any idea how hard I fucking lost it in my live reaction that we got to see Paper Body again?
Yeah, I'm so glad that it was Paper Body. That was the first Rokushiki technique that Stussy used, at least in the chapter.
I'm a little pissed that it is classified as Paper Body because I feel like this should have actually have been a form of shave, personally. But I'm happy that Paper Body has come back in some capacity. It's just one of those...
I would say like a Paper Body and shave merge.
Yeah. But Paper Body comes back. It annoys me that it just leaves an after image because it's just like, that's Nami's thing. I would have loved it more if she could have like coiled around his hand, like past his hand or something. How we saw Paper Body use pre-time skip. But hey, I'm just happy that Oda hasn't forgot that it exists because it means we may see it again. Because
I think a mad thing to consider is Lucci's perception hierarchy has to be pretty solid, and he fell for it. So like that to me is like, you can't like sense a difference in the will or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, that's you. Like everything in your like perception hierarchy tells you, oh, that's them.
Do you know what? That's an excellent point because I hadn't thought about that. Because remember, we just got through seeing Lucci keeping up with Gear 5, and although Gear 5 was beating him, it was beating him because Luffy is just stronger. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's pretty wild. I mean, Stussy's like good. Like, see, I thought it was gonna be like, yeah, okay, sure, she got Kaku, but Lucci's gonna be kind of better than her. Like, I don't think Lucci was gonna like roll over her, but I thought they'd have a bit of a back and forth. Nah, she kind of goofed on him too.
In the best possible way. I actually really loved this. I also loved how it's very true to Lucci's mindset of just like kill first, ask later. Just go in. Also,
Literally, you betrayed, you die, and then like if you have to file a report afterwards, like, well, she betrayed, so I killed her. I was
this
gonna argue with that.
actually falls in line as well with something I wanted to talk about. And I know this is probably going to seem like hard power scaling that comes out of nowhere and is like unnecessarily meticulous, right? But I'll make this brief. I promise I'll make it brief for this moment. Lucci coming in here with the finger pistol has no haki on his finger, right? It's important to note that since we've seen post time skip, when people have used finger pistol, the only time we've seen them we've seen them front on is when they've also had a zone, and when they've used a finger pistol and also had a zone, they've used haki in their hybrid form to do it, but they've already got the sharp finger, right? Whereas this is the first time we've seen a CP0 member where we see the finger where they don't have haki. And what I mean by that is like, so if you go back to Punk Hazard, when we see Virgo using finger pistol, we never actually see his finger. We see him and you hear like finger pistol on the page and you see the back of the person. You don't see his you don't see his hand, if that makes sense. Whereas when we see people use finger pistol that aren't in a human form, post time skip, we've seen them with like sharp talons, but they're also using haki, if that makes sense. This actually calls back to Water 7 and his lobby, where Rob Lucci with finger pistol actually couldn't penetrate Luffy, but when Rob Lucci went into his hybrid form, he could penetrate Luffy. Now, you could always just argue back then that it was because he's got like the sharp talon, so it just made his finger sharper anyway. But it's important to note that like Oda's actually sort of showing that in line, and I've been waiting to see whether or not we see someone try to use finger pistol where we actually see their finger to see if there's haki on a regular finger pistol, if that makes sense. I know that's a bit of a very nitpicky detail, but it's something that I've just been sort of taking a mental note of and holding in the back of my mind at the moment. Also, the fact that Paper Body, right, Heartbreak After Image, I feel like this is a female-specific Paper Body technique, maybe?
Or maybe it's unique to her.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised. So, by the way, one thing that I haven't mentioned is we had the whole chat about her being a vampire potentially, and then I watched a teching video, and he was like succubus, and I was like, how the f did I not think of that?
Yeah.
Surely she's literally like the queen of the underground prostitute ring.
Yep.
Like that's it. She's succubus. Like, I mean, it's still up in the air. Still could be. I mean, this definitely looks very vampire-y, but still could be succubus. I don't know. But Heartbreaker to me is like a
If you slap some hooves on that thing, then it's 100% she's a succubus.
Let me raise these 2 or 3 points about the succubus thing, right? If she has a vampire fruit, she could still have a vampire fruit, but be a specific reference as a succubus, being a female vampire, right?
There are like vampires that specifically will like charm men, like female vampires that charm men in order to suck their blood, kind of thing.
Number 2.
So it would still work thematically, essentially as a succubus, but still being a vampire.
Number 2, it could just be, like you said, an outright succubus. Number 3, this isn't a devil fruit because, my, you're so wild. Sea stone? We find out that Stussy's lipstick is filled with sea stone. She puts it on Lucci's neck so he can't transform, and she bites him. The question I have to ask here is this a separate lipstick to the one she's wearing?
Ooh, that's a good point.
Because, right?
Because if she had sea stone lipstick, and she then every time she bit someone, she would take away their devil fruit defenses.
Yes.
Right? She'd put her lips on them and then bite. And as soon as her lips touch them, their devil fruit defenses are gone, and she can just bite them freely.
But
that's brilliant.
If that's the case, that means she doesn't have a devil fruit, and this is a genetic manipulation.
Yeah.
Does she have a green blood tag hidden somewhere?
Well, we haven't seen one on her, like we discussed last chapter, but what this could mean is she could be, say, a half mink or something like that, another species that we haven't directly seen so far. We also know that, like, say, the likes of Kuma are a different species, and we still don't know what that actually entails and what that actually means. So, I mean, Or she could just be a clone that's had her RNA altered, and essentially her lineage factor has been manipulated so that she has these, growth-like wings to be able to grow wings. But again, it's important to note because two things are possible there. One, when she bites you, she, stops you from being able to transform. Number two, what if biting you as well gets some of the lipstick in your blood?
Right.
So you could get sea stone poisoning for a period of time where you're not able to transform.
Yeah.
The fact that this is even a concept to me at this point in time is freaking wild, and I'm loving it. And Glitter just brings up an excellent point. From a religious standpoint, Succubus and Seraphim have a clashing history, and she, with her professional history, does indeed line up with a Succubus. I don't know about you guys, but Stussy is looking more and more impressive by the day. And
I would say, so that I'm not completely goofing on Lucci, because I know I was rough on him
a couple
a few
chapters
weeks
ago.
ago. But she did say, "I know how strong you boys are. Fighting you fair and square would have been stupid."
Oh, she
So
did.
she does, which doesn't necessarily mean she's saying I'm straight up weaker than you, but it does mean like it would be a pretty friggin' hard fight, like
Ooh.
that kind of thing. So like, I'm not gonna say she's just like outright better than them. Obviously, it's like she got the drop on them. That was kind of it.
Another two things actually. So you see where she does her paper arts heartbreak after image.
Yeah.
I can't tell necessarily, but is her hair standing up on end, or is it almost as if it kind of looks like Kizaru rematerializing?
Yeah, I get what you mean. There's kind of like that pull, almost like when Luffy, like that first panel when you saw Luffy going into Joy Boy. Everyone thought he would have
Yeah.
like
Because
hair.
if you look by her right eye, there's another one there, and it almost looks like there's another one there. But then again, it could just be that her hair's drawn like as if she's moved really fast.
Yeah, right. It could just be like a blurring effect, or it
Yeah.
could be.
Because if
Yeah.
I would argue if it is meant to look like that effect, I would argue it's Oda trying to say they're like a relative speed to each other in that regard.
Could be like an illusory effect.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
like
Just like she's morphing together over here, like a cloud.
Yeah, that's a little strange.
Yo, but Lucci goes down, the poor bastard, finally feeling what it's like to get karma and backstabbed. I love how this is like how the tables turned sort of situation on him, where it's like when Lucci was introduced, the way we had characters backstab us and we were shook. I love how it's happening to him and shit's not going his way. And you can see on his face how pissed he is that he's got no control over the situation. I'm just sitting there just like, karma is an absolute bitch. And I'm glad it's getting you. You know what I mean?
I was gonna say as well, looking at his facial expressions now, he does seem like tilted basically. So could be that the reason that he thought that image was her was just because he wasn't using perception haki, because he was like mentally tilted.
True.
So it could be that as well.
Yeah, it could be that he got caught off guard, so he wasn't exactly focused. Hence why he just goes for the kill, and then she's
Like,
able to
I see
blitz him.
you, I attack you.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
not thinking about, I need to make sure I track where her soul is positioned.
And we get confirmation that this is the person that Vegapunk was talking to last chapter. So not last chapter, the chapter before, so 2 chapters ago. Look, last chapter I felt like made it very abundantly clear with the ending that was the case. But I will give myself a little round of applause there that it is confirmed. Just because, it's what I expect from it, if that makes sense. But yeah, let's keep going through with it. So we've got Brooke. He's just like, oh, okay, they've turned on each other. Stussy's on the phone to Vegapunk, and they're all like, sweet, we're all sorted. And I actually thought of this, right? So see how you know how York is the eat, sleep, repeat cycle Vegapunk?
Mm-hmm.
Think of the strained relationship that's going to happen on the Sunny when we know that they end up having issues with food quite regularly, where they run out of food because of Luffy, right? with York on the ship and Sanji not being able to say no to feeding a girl.
Oh, jeez.
He's gonna be swooning over her like crazy, just like, eat this and this and this. And Luffy is gonna be like, I want some, I want some, I want some. You know what I mean? So they're gonna be just as bad as each other, just eating like crazy. I wouldn't be surprised if we have to take another emergency stop after this arc, solely because we run out of food again.
That would be a perfect explanation and easy get on board with.
Which also would make it a kind of easy aspect to get us to Elbaf, because we also know in Elbaf they've got giant animals, so it'd be a lot easier to cook giant food for a giant supply of hungry people. Just thought that was a
Not
weird,
a warrior
interesting note.
culture, you know, we have big feasts all the time.
Well, we saw with Kid when he got nearby, like, you know how the koi around Wano were about 200 meters long? The fish around Elbaf were about the same size, but they were different. They weren't koi. So it's like, yeah, they've probably got big everything there, which means bigger feeds for everyone there.
Actually, going along with that as well, we just got the reveal of like Jaguar D Soul and the O'Hara information and things like that. It could very well be that after this arc, it's like Vegapunk's like, oh, where do we go next? And then similar to like you're saying, like they run out of food. They're like, we need to go somewhere close because we need food. And then Vegapunk's like, well, hey, how about I introduce you to your friend Robin? Let's go to Elbaf. It like suits everything. They've got massive feasts there, lots of stockpiles of food. They're kind of allies with me, so they can protect me, and I can stay there.
Mm-hmm.
And Robin can go meet Jaguar Soul, and then that could happen to be another big story arc.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like, I feel like we're going to go to Elbaf next because, and as we'll sort of get into later, I think with the way that the story's going, where this is clearly the parallel to Sabati. So after Sabati, we got Amazon Lily, which I think will be Elbaf, where it's like a very cultural arc, right? Mm-hmm. And then Impel Down, which may be with what happens at the end of this chapter with setup. We may get like a Impel Down 2.0 in some capacity, even if it's a small arc or a small side arc, like side story that's happening outside of the Straw Hats.
Well, I mean, you could even consider that like a version of Impel Down this way around, because it's like more an abridged story, because it's, you know, Oda's trying to end the series kind of thing.
Yep.
It could be like the Impel Down version is more of the side story of Garp going to get Kobe and all of that stuff that's going on there. So it could be that like the Straw Hats don't even necessarily do the Impel Down arc, but it still technically happens.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that when we get to the cliffhanger at the end of this chapter, I reckon. We'll circle back around to that. I know I keep saying that, but it's like, this is a long chapter, and believe me, there's going to be plenty to talk about. Okay, so that being said, we cut over to someone of the same rank giving an order to the Seraphim can't override an order for the Seraphim. Stussy, being the same rank as Lucci, can give orders to the Seraphim, but she can't override Lucci's orders. That is interesting.
Doesn't make any sense.
I feel like they should just receive whatever order is the newest.
Because if you say, go kill everybody in the world as a joke, then next minute you go, oh, crap. Better go find Vegapunk to overwrite that.
Yep. But, hey, it is what it is there. We see the Seraphim attacking, and obviously we've got everyone coming in. And we have Mihawk try to take out Lilith and clash with Zoro. And Mihawk is shook as shit! Woo! The way this little Seraphim little bitch is sweating. It makes me feel so good for Zoro that he's picking on a little kid.
I had a whole ass different thing. I get this. I see this sweat now. I get that. But who gets knocked back?
Knocked back?
Yeah.
I don't think...
At the end of that clash is standing in place on the ground and who's flying backwards through the air.
Well, I think both of them are flying, like both of them are in the air. Because if you look at where they're clashing...
No. Look, his feet are on the ground.
I'm seeing what.
Finished his slash, and his feet are still on the ground, and then you've
Okay.
got Zoro with his sword
So-
out, being flown back.
I see what you're saying. I'm looking at the clash right now, and it looks like Mihawk's like jumped slightly in the air because I can see white under his feet. Right?
Hey, are we looking at the same panel?
Where they're clashing, and it says clash.
Oh no, I'm doing the next.
Yeah,
panel
no.
when
So
they separate.
where they clash, where they're still connected, right? It looks like both of them are in the air,
Yeah, kind of.
right? Mihawk's sweating, Zoro's fine, and then it looks like they follow through with the clash, and both of them are stepping back. It's just the way it's being portrayed is we're looking at it more from the Mihawk Seraphim's perspective. That's how I sort of see that. I can see where you're coming
When I
from, whether
see
it looks like he's being pushed back.
Seraphim's feet are on the ground. Like you can literally see the ground under his feet in that panel.
Yep.
And he's like finished his slash and he's got his sword back by his side, basically ready for another upward slash. And Zoro was like flying back, going, "What the hell are you?"
See, I can completely see that, and I think that's a completely valid take, right? The way I first interpreted it is like Zoro comes down while the Mihawk one's jumping up to do a slash, so they're both in midair, right? But because Zoro's like significantly higher up in the air, after they do like their, you know how they do their like follow through and they both push each other off? It's just like Mihawk hits the ground first, but they're both fine. And the way the dialogue looks to me, and like the sweat, when I first read it at least, it was like the Mihawk one's like, I've never encountered someone this strong, whereas Zoro's just kind of like, you're good, but you're not the real deal sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Like that panel with the two faces definitely makes it look like Zoro's just like, "Haha, well, fuck you, kid."
Yeah.
And then the other kid is like, "Oh no, I'm in trouble." But then the other one, though, "What the hell are you?" So to me, basically, it's like Zoro hasn't used he hasn't used the Enma Haki. He's probably like hakied up his blades a little bit, but he hasn't really gone all out with the Haki. He's not using a technique or anything like that. It's just a sword clash. Whereas I don't know. I think Zoro has more capacity to like power up than this Seraphim does.
Yes.
Because thinking about it, this Seraphim has like pure skill and strength. He doesn't have like god tier sword techniques in the same way that he'd have like. I can't see him having as many like named attacks, and he doesn't have Enma as well. So like I think like this clash here, it going the Seraphim's way doesn't necessarily mean he's in any way stronger than Zoro. Like I think if this turned into a full-on fight, Zoro takes this. For sure.
Dude.
He just goes, "Oh
Okay.
damn, I'm gonna have to get serious against you." Enma's up, Ashura's him, and he just kills.
Okay. I want to say yes in the exact same capacity, but at the same point in time, part of me sort of sitting here just like, okay, yes, Zoro at this point in time in a freeze frame is stronger than this Mihawk Seraphim in terms of like his DC in my eyes, yeah. But where Zoro can power up with Haki, this one should arguably be able to power up with the magma too, like the fire. Mind you, we saw Zoro already beat that, right? Against King. But what we haven't seen is if this Seraphim can use Haki at all, because the Seraphim were left with their free will. So if...
That's the question, because it does take time to like learn Haki. So like, do they get it innately, or are they just so prodigious that they have already learnt it? Or
I would say they have a high potential for Haki, but they haven't unlocked Haki themselves because they're so young. Hence, like the kid aspect, right? But I think if they start coming across Haki users, they will be able to see and like start adapting and incorporating it. I reckon the Seraphim may have really crazy Haki blooms capable themselves, no different to how the Warlords would as kids in those same situations. So
in terms of potential, I guess, yeah.
So the problem here is that I could see is I think the Seraphim Mihawk has a greater potential than Zoro overall in the sense that he's the same as Mihawk but has like a superior DNA. Right?
Yeah.
But because he's so much younger and he's so much rawer and not refined, that if he gets cut down before he develops, he'll never reach that potential. Whereas at the moment, Zoro's in a much higher tier of potential as is. So I'm looking at this clash, And I'm like, is this the best or the worst possible thing to happen in this situation? Where it's like, is this Seraphim scared, and therefore, because he's scared, what would have happened if Mihawk was scared of a swordsman when he was younger? Because we know these things keep the same personality, right? If Zoro leaves this thing alive here, how many push-ups, how many sit-ups, how many 5K runs does it need to do a day for it to reach Zoro? You know what I mean? Is it going to do to Zoro what Mihawk did to Zoro in East Blue?
That would be an awesome change of pace.
And it would also come full circle in a way where it's like Mihawk, who doesn't typically... Like, Mihawk, the character analysis that I take away from Mihawk is he's suffering from success, right? He's reached the pinnacle of his field, and he is the first and foremost strongest person, right? Whether or not you think he's stronger or not than Shanks, I'm just going to say that's irrelevant. I'll point to the idea that Shanks has observation haki that can kill other people's observation haki. So therefore, right, you could argue that Shanks versus Mihawk isn't what Mihawk's looking for anymore. Because if you've got to take away one of his abilities, you're not surpassing one of his abilities, in a way, if that makes sense. Right? So, like, Mihawk may be, like, the kind of purist that it's like, I want someone to beat me at my best, not me be handicapped severely and then beat me, if that makes sense. And he doesn't...
No.
And he wants a fair fight. So he's suffering from success. So it's like, Shanks loses an arm. And, like, you could argue that Shanks got way stronger since then, or Shanks got given the credit that was due for him at that time. You know what I mean? Because we know when he lost his arm, he was over a bill. The difference between Luffy at 1.5 bill and Luffy now is tremendous, but at the same time, it's like not all that in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? It's the difference between learning techniques as opposed to getting necessarily stronger in a lot of different ways. Whereas, like, Mihawk, whether or not you think Shanks is a better swordsman than him or a better overall fighter than him, or Shanks only can compete by, like, cancelling out Mihawk's observation haki, which is arguably Mihawk's strongest feat, considering he was going to originally be called the Clairvoyant, right? And, like, his whole thing is about finessing people's fighting styles, right? It could be one of those things where it's like, this Mihawk Seraphim right here, this baby hawk, sees Zoro, and Zoro's obviously had that training that Mihawk gave him, and the ruthless, heartless nature, and he even speaks like, you actually have a spark of humanity still. On closer inspection, you're not the same, you actually have a spark of humanity. You know what I mean? Zoro is critiquing Mihawk there, just like being like, you're a cold, heartless bitch, right? But this thing being scared is like, you know, it's that form of weakness that the real Mihawk wouldn't necessarily display, and it's the same weakness that Mihawk has tried to beat out of Zoro, which realistically, you could argue Zoro no longer has that same sort of weakness now, post-time skip, which is arguably why as well Zoro's become a quote-unquote bland character post-time skip. Because that human aspect of him has sort of been robbed from him in a lot of ways. This Seraphim baby right here, if Zoro doesn't cut him down, you could have the full circle happen where this Seraphim is just like, I have to be the world's greatest swordsman. And to be the world's greatest swordsman, I don't need to beat Mihawk. I need to beat the thing that's going to be the next world's greatest swordsman. And I've seen it with my own two eyes. And it may be a thing where it's like, this guy becomes a problem for a little bit, right? And as he gets older, it gets a bit stronger, learns Haki if they're capable of learning Haki and that. And it could be a thing where it's like, come into series. You could have a moment where Zoro's fighting this Seraphim and giving him the same advice, arguably, that Mihawk gave Zoro originally. Because Zoro could get to the point where he's suffering from success as well. Sorry, I know that was a huge...
I got a question for you. Is there a better swordsman in world government than Zoro?
In the world government?
World government, yeah.
Okay. I would argue, at this point in time, there's a potential for all of the admirals to be better swordsmen than him, and the Gandhi Gorosei.
Fruit.
In terms of just swordsmanship,
yeah,
there is
Zoro has been shown to wield a longsword.
I stand by that same answer. We know Akai Inu is skilled with a sword. We've seen that Green Bull has a black blade, although we've never seen him use it. Right? Fujitora first and foremost is like a samurai sort of, like a wandering samurai, I would argue there's a potential that all of those admirals, even without the use of their fruit, may be as good, if not better, than Zoro at the current.
In skill
I
wise.
think Fuji only.
That's fair. I'm not saying as a hard yes. I'm saying there's a potential, right?
Because like I think like Zoro's sword skills is so much so that even if you had the magma fruit, you'd still use a sword. Not just like have a sword, but like use a sword all the time while you're fighting. Like, once you get that good at swordsmanship, you wouldn't put it down. I mean, even if someone gave you a fruit that was just like outright better than you could ever achieve in swordsmanship, it would be like I can't just like neglect all of my swordsmanship training through my whole life.
I completely understand and see that. The only thing I say that's like hard with that is like when we look at these admirals, we don't really see them fight out all out too much. But of the original admirals, we've seen our Kiji default to using an ice sword and be a swordsman. We've seen Kizaru default to using a light sword and being a swordsman. We haven't seen Akainu do it, but we've seen Akainu when he's growing up with the Marines actively be a samurai sword user prior to getting his fruit, as far as we're aware, and actively like go around with a sword. With Green Bull, he potentially has a black blade, which would make him the only other person other than Ryuma and Mihawk to have a black blade. And then there's also... Oh, sorry, we're getting that mic feedback again. There's also the potential, obviously, like you said, you think that Fujitora might be. That's perfectly fine. But I would say just because they are potentially... just because they're potentially as good as Zoro with the sword doesn't mean Zoro can't surpass them at the moment. And what I'll mean by that is like they could use their devil fruits against Zoro, right? But I feel like how I kind of see it at the moment is like the difference between if I'm giving Mihawk the credit of a Yonko, right? Zoro at the moment is that of a first commander. Zoro as a first commander, and with like a lot of the other first commanders, they're like only one aspect of a Yonko in a lot of ways. Even if they're close to them, they're still like one major aspect of them, right? Zoro at the moment is like if the other admirals and stuff like that are say equal to him or greater than him in swordsmanship, he would be fighting tooth and nail to overcome them the same way that Luffy did in Wano against say Kaido in that same situation. And like when he starts to develop better sword skill than them, that's when they start going, oh shit, we better start using our powers on top of this to help out. Which I think in turn is sort of what you were saying, where it's like they need to default back to their fruits. But I would say I think the gap is a lot, like the gap for them needing their fruit, although it's big, it's a lot less than maybe expected in that regard, if that makes sense. The fact that we know that they're all trained in swordsmanship and we've seen half of them default to using swords.
Yeah, well, anyway, the reason I asked that was to ask this. Don't you think it would be like basically the Mihawk Seraphim has just like fought every person in the world government who's like a considerably strong swordsman, maybe probably except for the admirals, because I don't know if they'd be bothered with it. And he's just trashed everyone, like all the vice admirals. He's just trashed them all. He's just been, and so in his mind, he's like, I am probably the strongest swordsman other than original Mihawk, and one day I hope to beat him. And then he comes across Zoro, and it's like, oh, there are other strong swordsmen out there. This guy's probably stronger than me.
I would say no. I would say how I interpret it at the moment. The reason why I say no to that is because although that may be his mindset, the Seraphim can't turn on the world government. So I don't see him having it in him because of his coding to challenge anyone in the world government. And therefore he hasn't really tested his mind. I see him, he probably has the knowledge that he's a clone of Mihawk, the world's greatest swordsman. So he's probably sort of been spoon-fed like, you have the potential to be the world's greatest, but you're superior than him in body, so you should surpass him, if that makes sense. And so that's probably his mindset there. Whereas, like, as for him, like, challenging people in the world government and stuff like that, in swordsmanship, I just see it as anytime he goes in a place where he could do that, they would just have the authority chip, in which case he's got to be subservient.
Well, no, I'm thinking they're intentionally training him. I'm not thinking he's running around killing like.
I don't
these
think
admirals.
I don't think the Seraphim have had any training yet, and the reason why I don't think they've had any training yet is because I still think they're relatively new, hence why they're so young.
Surely they would test their combat capabilities. Like, you're not going to clone Mihawk and then be like, he's got a strong body. I'm sure he's good at swordsmanship. We'll just give him a sword and see how he goes.
We've seen this arc that this fight against the Straw Hats and stuff like that is some of the best battle data. Is actually the best battle data that Vegapunk's gotten. He even says as much.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, this is a Yonko crew.
Yeah, no, but that's
This next level shit.
that's the thing, right? He said that when it was just like Seraphim going up against like Sanji and stuff like that. Sanji, Robin, and Usopp. Oh, sorry, Sanji, Nami, and Usopp. You know what I mean? So it's like him saying that's a once in a lifetime chance to get battle data. Kind of says to me that the Seraphim, although they can confidently say they're stronger, right? They haven't really battle test. Like they're not battle hardened. They're battle tested, not battle hardened. They have been tested in their capabilities in like. Do you know what? They're clones. Best way to explain it, right? They're the clones in Star Wars, right? They're on Geonosis, right? Practicing their shooting, practicing their drills and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, in that finite environment, it's like, yeah, they're perfect, they're amazing. Their first actual out-of-world, like, out of simulation adventure was to try and take down the other warlords to prove that they're better. And they arguably didn't catch a single one.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like that's it. Like the clone troopers would basically fight little like mock battles against each other with non-real guns, right?
But I think
they would train. They had like a training academy that went for.
I think the training that
and
these
they would
guys have had
graduate.
have just been on Egghead and not against actual like skilled people. I think it's more like, can you do this projectile sword slash? Can you mimic the abilities that your real world body has?
I mean, it's possible, but like I just imagine like if I was basically created and then given a weapon and been like, you're really and they've just been told like you're really strong, go out and like fight a bunch of people. Like the way that Mihawk so confidently just like ran at Blackbeard and just went, yeah, I can clash with you. Like to me, I'd be like searching all the data that's in my head. This guy's a Yonko. I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight this dude. I'm not going to just confidently go up and swing my sword.
No. I can
have a bit of practice.
I completely understand that, and I completely agree with it. But that, in turn, is a little bit like, isn't that kind of like Vegapunk's arrogance that we've seen?
You think they could just like take out a Yonko?
Not that they could just take out a Yonko, although there's a potential for them to take out a Yonko. Yeah, I think it's not that they've got the potential to take out a Yonko. I think it's just these things don't know their own limits yet, because Vegapunk doesn't think these things have a limit. He even verbatim said these are the strongest things on the sea.
They are. They just haven't grown into it yet.
Yes. So it's like they're still in their developmental stage, if that makes sense. So it's like he's talking as if it's the finished product, but he's still working with the raw ingredients to get there. And I think that's sort of what this is here, where it's like these things are sort of figuring out now where their ceiling's going to be, if that makes sense.
By the way, for the tier list, are we grouping Seraphim into one category?
Look, I would say for the tier list, by the way, announcement, we're going to do the tier list next week since there's a break next week. What day do you guys want to do it next week?
Preferably not a Sunday, just because like I start shift early on Monday.
How would you feel about a Saturday day?
I could do that, definitely.
Eggs? That work for
I
you?
think I can.
No?
What about Friday?
How about like Monday? Next Monday? Like the
I would probably be at work, so it would have to be after work.
because this week is going to be my busiest week for ages. I'm doing 2 courses and I've got a little job interview as well.
We will organise a time and I'll post it whenever it suits us. Look, it may not be this weekend, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. Even if me and Kuma, if you're too busy, me and Kuma may do like a pre-stream talking shit and power scaling, leading
We
up
can
to
talk
it.
about powered systems
Woo!
before everything goes up.
Yeah, so we'll just keep an eye out on that in the horizon. We'll organise that behind closed doors. But for the purpose of the tier list, I would say don't include the Seraphim on the list, but include a note where you would put them and just group them all together.
Only
Okay.
include them?
Don't include them as individuals, right? Just put a side note where you would have the Seraphim and just have like a little sidebar saying Seraphim, if that makes sense.
But we're not giving them an official ranking. We're not including the Seraphim as a...
I would say no for the moment because I would say that's 7 spots on the list that would just very bloat out the
We
list.
could group them. I mean, are we doing Gorosei?
I would say you could do the exact same thing. You can include them on the list if you want. I would say because I don't.
This is why I'm saying we need rules on what we're
So-
including and what we're not.
Okay.
Because I'm gonna have like 7 Seraphim, 5 Gorosei, and then my top
Okay.
tier list is gonna be like the best first division commander is in
Okay,
the last.
So
spot.
make it plain and simple, right? Gorosei and Seraphim are that. They're listed as Gorosei and Seraphim. They take up 1 space each, right? They're not directly on your list, but include where you would rank them.
I don't want to do like a second list next to my other list. I'd rather just do one list.
Okay, then just include them as the 1 spot on your list. I'm gonna have mine separate.
But then I'm including people that you don't include. This is why I'm saying we need.
Who are you including that I don't include?
If I include Seraphim and you only put them as like a side tier, then everything on my list is gonna get pushed. I'm gonna.
Yeah, so just include them as 1 spot. Just include them as 1 spot because we don't even know all the Seraphim.
No, but if I do that for the Seraphim and then I do that for the Gorosei and then I include like Im and I include like exactly what happened last time.
Yeah.
I included a bunch of things that you
okay.
didn't include or put it on a side plot.
Ooh.
And then my number 50 was like the best second division commander, and your number 50 was like the worst third division.
I'll put the
because I just
rules.
included more people.
I'll put the rules back out for you again in the Discord, right? But I already said anything that we don't know the name of a character, right? Include it as like an organization thing, and then just put it as a sidebar, so it's not on the list, but it's just off to the side of the list as a tab, as an honorable mention sort of thing, right? Do it with the pacifistas, do it with the Seraphim, do it with the Gorosei. I don't think there's a single thing outside of those 3 things that don't fall into that.
Then Im and Dragon.
You can include Im and Dragon on the list. I'm
Not
personally
doing that.
I'm personally removing Im specifically, and I said to remove Im specifically, right? But you can include Dragon.
Okay, so we're not doing Im, but we are doing Dragon.
Yes. We have more feats of Dragon than we do of Im.
Okay. Well, this is gonna be
Yeah, we
so
don't- we
different
don't
from
even know if
everyone
Im knows
else's
how to
because I'm just
fight.
gonna.
We
be
don't-
including all those people, and you're gonna be like, I've got them as a sidebar, and I'm just gonna be like, yeah.
That,
okay,
that's completely fine. The only groups that I'm
Because
including as a sidebar.
The fun thing about the list, though, is to be like my number 30 could beat your number 30. But last time when we did it, because I included a lot more people, my number 30 was like actually stronger. You know what I mean? Like my number 30 was like a first division commander, and yours was like a third division commander kind of thing.
Like I said, right? Plain and simple. Just keep the Seraphim as 1 thing. Because at this point in time, we don't know if any of the Seraphim are stronger than any other of the Seraphim.
Yeah.
Right?
I get that, including them as a group, yeah. But
Yeah.
then we all have to agree that we're including them or not.
Yeah, no, include them as a group. Just do it as a sidebar, right? So because that way you're not
But
pushing
that's the same
someone
as not including.
but that way you're not pushing someone else completely off the list.
Okay.
Does that?
Just not gonna put them then.
Okay, that's fine.
'Cause I don't want to. I don't
okay.
want to do 2 lists. I don't want to do a list and then like another side list.
Okay.
that-
How about
like,
this? I'll make it
rounds.
easy for you. I'll make it easy for you. Don't include Im, you don't include the Gorosei, and you don't include the Seraphim or Pacifistas. At the end, after your list is up, I'll ask you a simple question. Looking at your list, where would you include those groups? And we'll do it that way. How about that?
Sure, let's do it that way. But I think
Perfect.
what most people do is just basically say, who do I think is the top 50 strongest? And then you would just put Seraphim as a group in there because you'd think that they're, I think that Seraphim are above first division but less than an admiral.
Okay.
And you'd put them in that.
And that's
rank.
perfectly fine. If that's what you'd prefer to do, you can do that. The only reason I say not to do that is just because I feel like it pushes too many people out of the list, and you actually want to include people on the list. Like if you do like a run through, right? Like if someone, and I know you're not going to do this, right? But if someone was like to say the pacifistas and they put PX 1 through to 20 on their list, it's like, why include them on the list?
Well, that's when you have rules like where you group them.
Exactly.
Like for example, if all of us were in unanimous agreement that admirals are equal in strength no matter what, then we would just include them as a
Yeah.
as a group.
At this point in time, though, I think the verdict's out on that.
I don't think anyone puts them together in a group.
Yeah, no, I think just like the Yonko, there's healthy breakups in their ranks, if that makes sense. Okay, that being said, let's keep going with this. So we see Zoro clash with Seraphim Mihawk, right? It is important to note that Zoro's got Haki on his sword where the Seraphim doesn't. You can't quite see it where they clash, but you see it where you see the close-up on Zoro, where you see the temper blade on Zoro. That normally indicates that he's using his Haki there. And then we have the Seraphim start attacking the Labo phase or the Punk phase and that. Sanji comes out of freaking nowhere saving Lilith. I mean, good on him, he's a Chad. But he even kind of like shocks Zoro for a second there, where he just comes out of nowhere carrying her. Right? And finally we get the kill order, so the Seraphim stop. And again, we get one beautiful look at the Labosphere and Egghead Island. The island still says 100%. So I'm still waiting for something to come of that 100%. Okay?
It may literally just be like we charged up to like launch away, and then you can once it's 100%, you can launch whenever you want.
I could agree with that. We'll come back to that, right? Because I've got a few theories on that. Sidebar though, if it is something stupid like it's just gonna rain, I'm gonna be pissed off. Like it hits 100% and it starts raining, I'm gonna be like, you piece of shit. How dare you, right? How dare you waste my mind like that? But yeah, apparently Vegapunk's
so good if Vegapunk's like, oh, my kettle's boiled.
Oh my gosh!
Don't.
Imagine tea time, boys.
But Dr. Vegapunk's main stellar body has vanished. I'm assuming that's them just not realizing that he's with Bonnie. I think that's all that is. We cut to the second part of this chapter. Beautiful, wild part of this chapter. Sphinx Island in the New World. Right? Whitebeard's hometown. We have some kids talking about how scared and sad they were that the world government / Marines showed up. And Margot's listening to them talk about how terrified they were and how brave they were. We get... What was this guy's name? Captain Radellini? Was that his name? This reminded me way too much of Nezumi from Arlong Park.
I know. I thought he was. I thought he was genuinely.
Words don't describe how much I'm sitting here going, if you look like a rat, put a gun to their head, get them out of the Marines. They're scum. Like, I'm sorry. You know the whole don't judge a book by its cover? No, in One Piece, judge. Judge that book. At least put him through a deeper screening process. This dude puts a gun to a kid's head and is like, hey, you got some money? Or I'll shoot, bitch. Like, what?
Can you imagine just walking up to a random island? It's like, give me money. And then they're like, oh, we don't have any money. Like, I'm going to kill this grandma. What?
But
Why?
Perfectly valid reason.
there is some important stuff to note here, okay? Number one, Marco has bandages on his head.
Yes.
Number two, in the first panel we see with the rat dude, right? See to the left of it how there's those buildings? Notice how they're all on fire. Or one of them's on fire, the big one's on fire. Right? They obviously pull their guns, they go to shoot. Weevil, the beast of a man, shows up and puts them out, right? Setting them packing, right? Again, remember that building was on fire. Yeah?
Actually, two of them are.
Yep.
One of them has like a crack in the roof.
Yep. So, Weevil sends these Marines packing, right? Last time we saw Weevil was when the Warlords were abolished. It's been a while. That was around chapter 566, I want to say. I'm going to look that up just to be safe, actually. Yeah, I want to say 566. Weevil shows up, and they go, warships were meant to hunt down the Warlords, now they've disbanded. We've lost all contact with the other squad. He got them all. What strength? He's a bona fide monster. And then we find out that he's been captured, right? Do you know what is actually a really crazy tie-in with this? So, we find out that he's been captured by Green Bull, right? Which... Does this make Green Bull look good, or does this make Weevil look bad?
I think it
I
makes
prefer to say
Green Bull look
morally gray.
Morally grey?
Because at the same time, you've got the same guy going around killing Whitebeard's former followers, but he comes back to protect his pops' home.
I mean, yes. Oh, okay, sorry. It's not 966. It'll be 956. Yes, but
I think Admiral level for Weevil is like stretching it in terms of like expecting that he's going to be Admiral level in strength. So I think like Green Bull being able to take him out is kind of expected, and also helping like his reputation a bit. Like he's not, because he's kind of got punked on earlier. Now it kind of gives him a bit more cred. If we're kind of like stretching Weevil to be like around Admiral level, then it makes sense that in like a really tough fight, Green Bull should be able to beat him. If Green Bull isn't a total chump like he's been so far shown to be, because I think if Green Bull failed to take out Weevil here, that's like cringe on Green Bull. That's
well,
like, oh,
they could have just not mentioned Green Bull.
True.
In that regard, if
Well,
they
I
were
mean,
going to do
someone
that.
has to take him, right? Like someone has to.
Well,
Yeah.
that's if someone was going to take him. He's the only warlord that got captured.
As far as we know, no admirals hunted any of the warlords.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Like,
No Seraphim as well, right? Except for Boa.
Well, we know
the fact
Borrow.
that they didn't send an admiral after Mihawk, that kind of boggles my mind.
Boa had at least 2 Seraphim go after her.
Yeah, but Boa was only after she'd thrown the Marines back out to the sea for like a couple of weeks, wasn't it?
No.
Oh, I thought
she had fought the Marines off on a couple of attempts, and then they brought in the Seraphim.
No,
And that was when you actually see them.
It was because it's a siege, because the island's a fortress. It just took the Marines a long time to make landfall. And Blackbeard showed up after the Marines had taken landfall, and once they'd made landfall, they sent the Seraphim in with the 2 groups, because the groups were split up into 2 for the Marines. There was the squad with Yamakiji, and then the squad with Kobe.
Right.
So
It took a while at the very least, because the thing is that all of the other admirals fought off the people that were attacking them and then left and then ran
Warlords.
away, basically. Yeah, all the other warlords, yeah.
yeah,
Fought
so
off the warship and then left. They didn't destroy the ship and then just stay on the same island and be like, who's next? You know?
well,
Whereas Boa did.
so here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. The only one that actually fought off the warships was Mihawk.
Yeah.
With Buggy, Crocodile third-partied and came from behind on the warships.
Yeah.
So you could argue that they weren't expecting to get third-partied, right? With Boa, you could argue that they were going to succeed as well had Blackbeard not interfered. Because they also had the Seraphim there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I had the Seraphim, yeah.
So, including the Boa Seraphim, who could arguably, because she is still Boa, arguably unturn people to stone. So yeah, they were potentially going to have gotten Boa, Buggy, and Weevil Boa and Buggy, right? Because Weevil actually didn't get captured by the Marines. That's the funny thing. right?
So well, that's kind of what I'm saying is that like, or would have gotten captured, but that's because she stayed on the island
Yeah.
that she was on. She like literally just stayed there. Weevil didn't get captured originally, but then on the second count did because he again just stayed on the island.
Well, so this is the
They
thing,
knew
right?
where he was.
If you go to chapter 956 and 957, right, the ending of 956, you get the abolishment of the warlords. Weevil is on an island surrounded by an armored division corps. If you look at the island, it looks very similar to this island, except how Sphinx Island has pine trees. The island he's on there has spherical trees, right? But if you actually,
I think it's a different.
but if you actually look at the island, in this chapter, you can see some round trees in the distance, right? Just like in 956, you can actually see a town in the distance with some buildings on fire. In this chapter, they specifically say after Weevil comes in and attacks, right? We've lost all contact with the other squad. He got all of them. What strength? He's a bona fide monster. I'd actually argue that is Weevil on the island, but on the far side of the island, right? Because this also takes place after Mihawk's left the island to go help Luffy, right? So this is Weevil on the far side of the island. A squad got sent to take out Weevil, and while he's getting taken out by that squad, this guy's trying to go steal treasure. Weevil wipes out that squad and heads over to the town and then defends the town.
Yeah, right.
It's a bit
He
hard.
basically takes out the whole warship that came for him, and then just went over and then took out this random side squad that went over there to greedily
Yes.
take money.
Yes. And again, it was an armored division corps of the Marines, but there was no notable persons that went after Weevil, right? We don't know any notable people that went after Mihawk, but arguably we know that Mihawk essentially defeated the fleet since he's alive and escaped. But then again, we don't know if he defeated it. He may have just ran away. Although that's not really Mihawk's.
Although, like,
style.
I would say, like, we did see Crocodile like on the ships, just like blowing them up one at a time. So,
But that was with
it wasn't
Buggy.
really getting pushed that hard. Yeah. But I mean, what I'm saying is like, it's not like that fleet had like multiple admirals or anything on it, or like many Seraphim. Because if that was the case, they'd be on.
No,
Crocodile.
it's like the fleet that went after Buggy had Stainless, a vice admiral, which you can make an assumption at this point in time Crocodile defeated.
Which wouldn't be that hard of a statement. I mean, he got a 2 billion bounty after it, so.
Yeah. Which I mean, like it both makes, because again we're at a point here where it's like I don't think a lot of people really understand. Like the vice admirals are strong. It's just the warlords filled the gap between vice admirals and admirals, right?
Just wasn't like a point in the story that we were fighting vice admirals directly.
Well,
Like at the time that the Straw Hats were on their level, you know what I mean?
see, there was in a way, but it wasn't delegated to the Straw Hats. Like Virgo in Punk Hazard, right? Was shitting on a lot of people.
Yeah, but that's the thing is that at the time, right, we see that, but what we're thinking isn't, wow, vice admirals are really strong. It's, wow, this is an underling of Dofi. That means Dofi must be even stronger.
Mm-hmm.
But that was like that was the idea there. So yeah, like, but what I'm saying is like we didn't have like an arc where like the main
Villain
bad guy
was a vice admiral.
was a vice admiral. Whereas like we did have that with like CP9 members, and we did have that with like, I mean, we've had clashes against admirals before and stuff like that.
That's sort of the thing.
We just haven't had them directly power scale.
That's sort of the thing, though.
Like sub power scale.
Yeah, so that's sort of the thing. We've had them sub power scale where we've got like, so Virgo is not just a vice admiral; he's a vice admiral base captain, right? So there's sort of three types of vice admirals. There's vice admirals that work at a base, vice admirals that are a base captain, and then there are vice admirals that have free reign with what to do, right? Smoker was a vice admiral at G5. Virgo was base commander of G5. Virgo obviously being stronger than Smoker in a lot of people's eyes. You could argue it either. It's just easier to say that, right? Maynard was a vice admiral that worked at a navy base. I'm forgetting his name. He's got Shark Cutter the sword. Where's Bastille? There we go. Thank you. Bastille was the base commander for Maynard. Maynard and Bastille both got taken out in Dressrosa, right? But it's like Maynard got taken out against Bartolomeo in a barrier, cornered in a room where he couldn't escape.
Yeah.
And Bastille got taken out by Sabo, who at this point in time has a higher bounty, as far as we're aware, than Luffy. So
That's bloody Slabo, like, come on.
yeah, no. So it's like
Coming out with the dub.
it's like the first time we saw revised admirals, they were showed off really well. The second time we see them, it's just like they had two really unfortunate circumstances, but it doesn't matter. And then we get to Wano, and it's like Drake was a rear admiral and was the weakest of the top 10, arguably, but he was still in their top 10. And Who's Who was just a CP member who was the highest of their organization out of the top 4, with Kaido and the 3 calamities. You know what I mean? So it's like they have been sub-power scaled, but their sub-power scaling is still like very relative. It's not like they're weak. It's just they're not a top 4 combatant on a crew. If that makes sense.
The Vice Admirals, I would say, because just that there are so many of them, they've kind of fallen into the pitfall of their own rank. What I mean by that is that because so many of them share a similar status, it's just that once Oda demonstrates what one Vice Admiral can do, it's kind of leveling the playing field on quote-unquote, this is all what they're capable of.
Well, I think that's kind of the point in a lot of ways, though, because it's like the Marines, the Vice Admirals have a very consistent showcasing where they know Rokushiki, and they either have a Devil Fruit or they're swordsman specific, if that makes sense. They all sort of fill into those roles, right? But like,
also because the Marines are also a lot more structured, I guess. Granted, there are exceptions when, I guess, greed and politics play a part, but overall, I would say the Marines are genuinely pretty well balanced in terms of placing where people are supposed to be.
If you ignore your own perception, right, and you just go based off how the world is told to us, not how we view the world in One Piece, right?
Yeah.
We're told that of the world government, the Marines and 7 Warlords specifically counterbalance all 4 Yonko. Right? You can interpret that as that whole group counteracts 1 Yonko, or you can interpret that as that whole group counteracts 4 Yonko, right? If 4 Yonko crews showed up on the Marines and Warlords base, like at Marineford and that, look, the 4 Yonko are taking that, right? But if you play like an averages and a numbers game, right? At the moment, there's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15, 20... There's 23 Vice Admirals canon in the story right now that we know of, right? There is room for that to grow, right? That is essentially the world government's version of the Topiropo, of like the leaders of the Enraged Army, those Yonko crewmates that are like slightly lesser than, if that makes sense, right? And it's like, you've got some pretty damn good looking characters in those groups and stuff like that to go against those people, right? And considering they're Vice Admirals, you can arguably make an argument that they're all stronger than the likes of Drake. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where it's like, we may see them and they may all sort of be like a dime a dozen, right? With like only Garp being like the standout. But I feel like Oda's done that on purpose because although they're like a huge group, they're supposed to be a huge group that is all roughly that same strength level, because not only were they narratively supposed to counteract those same combatants in the 4 Yonko crews, it's also because come end of series, they're going to be paired up against people that need a strong opponent, but there's no strong opponents left to fight, if that makes sense. So it's like, you'll have the likes of like Cavendish or Barto fighting a Vice Admiral. You'll have the likes of Killer in the Final War fighting a Vice Admiral. You know what I mean? They're combatants that we know are strong and strong enough, and we also know that they're confirmed all to have Haki, right? Some of them are giants. Some of them are zone users. Some of them are paramecia users. Some of them are Logia users. All of them are trained in Rokushiki and sword skills. You know what I mean? So it's like definitely one of those groups where it's like they tick enough boxes to be threatening enough in a large group. I just feel like we see the bad end on them at the moment because we haven't had an arc that actually focuses on the world government post time skip full stop.
Fair. A lot of people actually, they kind of disregard the Marines, but they're actually pretty stacked when you look at them on paper.
Yeah, no, definitely. And not even just stacked on paper. Like, if you look at it from the perspective of they've got 4 admiral level people, right? Including the fleet admiral, right? They got 4 admiral level people. Before the warlords were abolished, right? They had 7 warlords, plus the 7 seraphim, right? So that's 14 Yonko commander level people. 23 known canon vice admirals, right? So they got 23 people to fill like the 6th to 10th strongest people on a Yonko crew, right? Then you've got the rear admirals, who literally a rear admiral became the 10th strongest on a Yonko crew, right? And then around the Commodore strength level, we've seen Commodores defeat people with over 200 million buried bounties, right? That were Logias. And we've had people around there, right? We've had people around that strength level, like the Commodores and captains. Like Kobe's a captain, Tashigi's a captain. So we've seen people in those 2 tier ranges have Haki already, right? But then you've also got 20 regular pacifistas that are either arguably above or below that. So it's like, and that's just in the Marines themselves. No CP or anything like that. You know what I mean? So it's like when you start looking at them in that way, it's kind of like, you kind of get that mindset that like Whitebeard did back in the day when Odin was on his crew and he's like, why don't we just fight them? They're the world government. They'll be easy. And it's like, dude, you don't understand. They keep coming and they're strong. It's not worth it. You know what I mean? But then again, that is what it is. Getting back to what I was saying though. Sorry, I know that was a long tangent. So chapter 956, we get the warlords attacking we get the world government do their Order 66 on the warlords, right? Remember at the end of Wano how we had the CP0 ship out the front and they got a strange call, and I was like it was really weird because we thought it was Green Bull because the next chapter Green Bull shows up, but it's after a week. So there's like an odd time skip of a week where it seems like Green Bull's on his way but doesn't come and do anything, right? That would be when he was taking out Weevil. That fills that same timeline. So what happened is he takes out Weevil. After he calls up CP0, takes out Weevil. After taking out Weevil, right, he comes back to Wano, right, and then attacks the Straw Hats, and that a week later, and was clean at that point in time in the story. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it definitely is one of those things where it's like, in terms of order of events, it does sync up well to finally fill that gap that we had, which for the longest I was like, why does it sound like he's on his way immediately and then shows up a week later? Like that actually really irked me. You know what I'm saying?
A little bit of a recap. You can do a lot in a week.
Yeah. But that being said, obviously, Buckin just outright confirms. One, she confirms that she wasn't going to do anything against Green Bull. Which is kind of funny, but it's like, and now it begs me to question whether or not Stussy's stronger than she ever was, or whether or not she has the same abilities that Stussy does and just got weaker over time. But then again, Bucking never joined the world government, so maybe Stussy and her Rokushiki techniques are what Bucking could have become.
Yeah, more so like a potential line instead of like block for block in this case.
Yeah. That being said, though, right, we also get I started talking shit before I read this full thing in my live reaction. Former member of the Rocks Pirates, self-proclaimed scientist. I went on a whole tangent where I was like, dude, how dirty does Oda have to do you to every time you do anything, right? Self-proclaimed Whitebeard's lover, self-proclaimed Whitebeard Junior. Like, every time you say something, Oda is just factually being like, yo, she's a liar. Don't believe it. You know what I mean? And then I read the Mad's resident freeloader, and I was like, fuck sake. I should just finish that sentence. Because it's like, dude, he's been setting up that she's full of shit for so long. And it is
Kind of funny
hilarious.
because he probably like looks at the fan base and people are still like, "Oh, I wonder if she's a really good scientist." And he's like, "Guys, I've been telling you this forever. She's useless.
Yeah, dude, she's...
Get a hint."
It ain't her. It ain't
Remember
her.
in the
saying
panel
it.
when she was introduced, he didn't even bother to show her face.
Oh. But yeah, so she requests Marco to go save Weevil. She
And
also
fork over Edward's inheritance.
and she also scars Marco for life by going, Marco, I can hear it in your tone. You still doubt he's Whitebeard's. Well, I know someone who can prove it, Dr. Vegapunk. And Marco's probably sitting there going, did Vegapunk watch you and Pops?
Oh,
That's probably...
Okay, well,
dude,
well,
that-
wait.
that's-
Before we jump to that conclusion, technically, if it was the younger Stussy, then maybe.
Yeah, but Marco ain't seen no younger Stussy, has he? So he's imagining Crinklebeard here, right? An old man Vegapunk just watching in the closet for research purposes.
Oh god. There's a
Um,
reason Marco needs those glasses. It's
yeah.
to help him see now because of all the
Oh,
squinting
dude.
he's had to do in the darkness.
he's blinded himself on purpose. He could heal back from it. He just chooses not to. He can. He did what Fuji couldn't. Partially blind himself so he can turn it on and off.
That would actually be really cool.
Okay.
I don't know why you'd want to go blind, but that would actually be really cool.
Then we get to... First things first, break next week. Second things second. Then we get to the fucking end of this chapter. We see a fleet of marine ships and one world government ship. It's important that they show that they're different ships. We get a line. Kizaru-san, we've prepared snacks and tea for our guest. I'm sure you remembered to test for poison, right? Of course, sir. I'll take it to him. Back to your posts. Yes, sir. Have you ever met Dr. Vegapunk before? Once, a long time ago, I think what's happening now is truly such a shame. One of the big wigs finally makes a move. Highest authority in the world. One of the 5 elders, Saint J. Garcia Satin. Holy shit, we finally get the name of one of the Gorosei. He's also met Vegapunk in person at some point in time, which is wild. And just like when O'Hara got sentenced to death, he's also going such a shame. This is the most regretful of the Gorosei, as far as we're aware at this point in time. Not only that, like we were talking at the beginning, and like I said in my live reaction, right? This guy being Saturn, the one with the long beard is most likely Jupiter. The one with the handlebar mustache and bald is probably Mars. Venus is probably Gandhi. And young Sanji uncle is probably Mercury, if we are to believe in the chapter 233 theory that they're named after the Roman gods or Roman planets, and that they are, in fact, when they're first shown in chapter 233, that they are... By the way, chapter 233 is known as the strongest power in the world. Right? I'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure the chapter's name is the strongest power in the world. Right? But yeah, so if we're to believe based on those images and those naming schemes, it's theorized that they are named after their proximity to Luffy's bounty in the middle, Luffy being the sun god Nika, they're named after the planet's proximity to the sun. Do you guys have any thoughts on this?
I mean, gosh, I'm thinking that maybe Oda also comes out with something crazier. Like, let's say when all the Garas, like, you know, what's that? What's that mythology thing where all the planets align?
The solstice? The convergence sort of thing?
Yeah, I'm just thinking like maybe the Gorosei have an even greater weapon or something, and when they're all gathered at once and come to an agreement, then something happens.
Let me put this into perspective. So first things first, again, chapter 233, I got it up now. It's the world's greatest power, and that's the introduction of the Celestial Dragons, and it's after Bellamy one-punched, Luffy one-punched Bellamy, and that, right? It's also the first time we see the Sacred Land Merijoa. So we get to see the Gorosei there and that, in their typical BS poses, right? But, right? But. In terms of whether or not they are the, like, okay. I got to choose my words carefully here. Them potentially being named Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. You also have Pluton, Poseidon, and Uranus. Right? Those would be the other planets. You could make an argument theorizing, and I know a lot of people have theorized in the past that the Gorosei are going to be ridiculously strong, but I can see an argument that people are going to potentially bring up the idea that these guys are individually as strong as an ancient weapon themselves, hence sharing the same name as an ancient weapon. Also, in that theory, Im represents Earth, Luffy the Sun God represents the Sun, and Blackbeard would represent the Moon. If the Gorosei are as strong as an ancient weapon because they share the same level of authority as the naming scheme for the ancient weapons, it would also make sense that they were not worried that Shanks came and met with them. And Shanks even showed some level of humility with them in that regard. Now, you could also argue that that's because Shanks himself is a celestial dragon because of the Figureland family bloodline. But we'll have to wait and see with that, if that makes sense. So, rounding out, we have an island with new pacifistas, where Sentomaru is in charge of the pacifistas, right? Kizaru is arriving, and with Saint J. Garcia, we have a celestial dragon. I'm expecting Luffy to punch this man in the face.
Oh gosh.
Mimicking what happened at Sabaody with punching the celestial dragons, except this time he declares war on the world by punching one of the Gorosei. And I could see this causing a huge spike again for the Straw Hats bounties. Or at least Luffy's. The only question is whether or not Luffy fodderizes him, or whether or not Saturn actually is very strong himself. Right?
So, it's just that if we do get a bounty increase one arc later,
it would be to creep him ahead of the competition.
Yeah, like put Luffy maybe a 4 bill, give a 1 bill increase.
So
maybe 4, maybe 1.5.
I think there's also a potential that he doesn't get a bounty increase because they try to hush it, but also if Luffy punches him, there may be a scene where it looks like he's punched him like he punched Charlos, right? And a chapter ends and we go on break and it looks like he's one-shotting, right? Only for the next chapter for him to get up and actually be very competent, unlike Charlos, because they're doing the flip, right? So, what happened at Sabaody? We got a comrade kidnapped. We punched a celestial dragon because of the atrocities they've committed against the world. And we had an admiral come along with the pacifistas, and we were overwhelmed and had to run away, right? What if this time we're kidnapping someone in the sense that we're taking Vegapunk and Stussy, right? Luffy punches Saint J Garcia, aka Mr. Saturn. And although it looks like he's been low diffed, he's actually really strong. So he gets up, so he's not weak like the other Celestial Dragons, right? Resulting in Luffy versus Saturn. So the Sun versus Saturn, and Zoro and Sanji versus Kizaru, right? Also, it's important to note. Oh, I'll come back to that actually. If that scenario plays out, this arc also opened with a very important person being linked with these characters. Do you know who that was? Leader of the Revolutionaries, Monkey D. Dragon, on the phone to Vegapunk, with Vegapunk telling him, "I think they're gonna try and kill me soon." What if Dragon fulfills the exact same role that Kuma did in Sabaody? We know that Dragon has some type of wind-based ability, right? What if Dragon intercepts Luffy versus Saturn and Zoro and Sanji versus Kizaru and helps them escape by taking them both on while also trying to have a discussion with the Gorosei member, since the Gorosei member has left Marijois, right? And uses his wind abilities to send Egghead's stratosphere away, since it's a sky island. Leaving for the Marine Fleet to try and pursue and give chase. Leaving it for them to try and, send the whole Egghead stratum away. And in worst case situation, on top of that, because we know the Sunny's up there, the Sunny could coup de burst away at any given moment off that already moving island, Sky Island. That would mirror what happened at Sabaody pretty well to me. The other alternative that I can see is Saint J Garcia is here specifically so that the Seraphim won't turn on the invasion force, because he technically outranks Vegapunk in the hierarchy of command. What do you think?
I mean, that's considering how this chapter was weaving out. Do we know if the Gorosei is headed towards Egg Island?
I think it would just be this Gorosei member, but remember, Kizaru was on his way to Egghead.
Oh yeah, whoops. Yeah.
And they're talking actively about, have you met Vegapunk before? So they are coming to Egghead. So he's either here to... Because remember, we last got the report... Last time we heard about Kizaru, right? Kizaru was trying to be hailed by Akainu. Akainu was like, where's Kizaru? And they're like, he's already left to go give Rob Lucci support. Right? As far as we're aware, this isn't giving Rob Lucci support. But what Akainu did also find out at that point in time is that Luffy was fighting Rob Lucci on Egghead Island, which could in turn have meant this Gorosei member leaves because he's been told that Luffy's there, and they're sending one of the Gorosei, if they are strong, to go shut down the Sun God on Im's behalf.
It would be really sick if this Gorosei met Luffy and he was like, "You're nowhere near as strong as the last Joy Boy that I fought. You've got a long way to come."
Yep.
I would love for him to say like he just like catches Luffy's fist, then he gives like the chilling remark like, "Where's the joy, boy?"
So, again, last time we saw the Gorosei, really? Like, properly saw them. I know we've seen little glimpses of them. The last time we probably saw them, what question were they asking Imu? What light do you want us to extinguish? Now, you can say that they decided on Lelucia Kingdom as being the light to extinguish, but that doesn't make sense when the light that Im was weighing up between was Luffy, Vivi, and Blackbeard at the time. Alternatively, this could be a huge red herring. Because do you know what else was happening? Garp was trying to go after Blackbeard. There is a possibility, although it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but there is a possibility that Garp ends up hailing them for help and they go to Blackbeard instead of Luffy. But what I would like to point out, right, are the crazy parallels here. So we have a arc specifically paralleling Sabaody, right? We have a celestial dragon coming to said island, right? We have Kizaru coming to said island. We had Sentomaru coming to said island. While at the same time, what's happening in the background is a son of Whitebeard had been captured by the world government and taken to Impel Down. They are seemingly setting up the same events that led to Marineford at this point in time. Just inversing them a bit. You got to look at Ace and Weevil. Ace was a non-biological son that Whitebeard accepted as his son, no question, right? And was loved, but was always trying to get out of his real father's shadow. Weevil is arguably biologically either Whitebeard's son or Whitebeard himself, if he's a clone, right? But he carries Whitebeard's blood. He's shunned by everyone because they don't believe that he's a son of Whitebeard, right? And all he wants to do is live up to his father's reputation. Both captured and taken to Impel Down. Meanwhile, the Sabaody parallels. I don't know what's going to happen next in the story. I honestly would actually prefer it if the Straw Hats don't go to Impel Down to help Weevil. If Marco actually enlists the help of someone else that we don't expect. I don't know if that would be the former Whitebeard pirates, or it'd be interesting if Marco goes to try and catch up with the... Marco might try to go himself, or Marco might try to catch up with the Straw Hats and end up catching up with either Law and Blackbeard or Kid himself, right? But in that situation, I think something that's really important to notice is ever since we were at Impel Down pre-time skip, it's been permanently set up that there's going to be another breakout at some point in time relating to the Revolutionary Army, and then when they decide to flip the switch on the world, they're going to break out of Impel Down and reinvigorate their forces, right? That was the whole point of level 5.5. We know that Bon Clay is now currently sitting in that position, and we also have a lot of parallels as well. Dofi fulfills the role of Crocodile, right? Weevil fulfills the role of Ace. We don't have a sympathetic person that went there willingly in the form of Jinbei, but we may not necessarily need that realistically. Who knows? But because we know that they're trying to do that, whoever Marco does enlist to try and go to Impel Down to help out may coincide with the Revolutionary Army breaking out of Impel Down anyway, and the Revolutionary Army may fulfill the role that Blackbeard played in the real Impel Down pre-time skip. I know that's a lot of hearsay, but that's just going based on how it's rhyming and paralleling the pre-time skip finale. There is a lot of stuff set up that's pretty identical, you know what I mean? And hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, if it's good structure, keep it.
But because of that, I don't really know where we go from here. Whether or not we do the same thing but have different results, or whether or not we fall victim to the same structure. I would say if we're falling victim to the same structure, Amazon Lily will parallel Elbaf in my mind. So we'd probably go to Elbaf next, whether or not that's Dragon blowing us off course with the whole egg stratum. Because it would also be really funny because it doesn't matter how big that egg is, it'd probably be really small and easily hid on Elbaf. You know? So that way Punk Records wouldn't be destroyed, and therefore Vegapunk's brain wouldn't be destroyed. because we know it's Vegapunk's dream to keep his brain alive and well, if that makes sense. But yeah, like, you have Elbaf, the warrior culture of all women. You've got, sorry, that's Amazon Lily. And then you got Elbaf, the warrior culture of all giants. Both are stated to be some of the strongest nations in the world. They definitely do parallel each other in those regards. So if we go to both of those, it would make a lot of sense for me, especially with how Luffy found easy allies at both islands pretty quick. But that is if Luffy's fulfilling those same roles. With Kid being there, what could happen is, you know how Luffy went to Amazon Lily and challenged the two Boa sisters, Sandersonia and Marigold, to a duel to save her friends? You could have a moment where Luffy, if the Straw Hats do make it to Elbaf, where Luffy is supported by the new giant pirates, Oimo, Kashi, Dory, and Broggy, right? While Kid is supported by the rest of the entire nation, because he's the one that actually got given the credit for taking down Big Mom, the woman hated by that entire nation. So you could have it where on the Island of Giants, under the eyes of the sun god, because the giants worship the sun gods, right? You could have Kid and Luffy battle it out there, and the winner ends up getting the backing of the giants. You could use this because you could make it so that Luffy gets like a huge army of like really strong people on his side, which would make a lot of sense, and we've seen it happen time and time again. Or you could arguably do it because the Giants are said to be the strongest nation in the world. You could do it to make Kid like a fake relative, competitor to Luffy and Blackbeard. Like, if Kid got all of Elbaf on his side, you could wave away and be like, Kid's still relative to Luffy, even though Luffy's got a whole fleet. You know what I mean? But yeah, I've been rambling for a bit. Let me know. Am I crazy? Are these ideas and themes connecting? Are they making sense?
I think it's possible that, like, reputation-wise, Kid could be considered like close to Luffy.
Yep.
But in strength, nah, fam.
Yeah, no. Like, look, strength is out the window. Although, mind you, I really want Kid to learn the Elbaf Spear, because, dude, imagine him in his giant robot form being able to spam it. That'd be cool, but it'll also be something that it's like, it may be too cool for Oda to do for Kid. Rip.
I'm also intrigued because I want Kid, like, Kid showed no form of armament hockey at all during Wano, right?
Never saw him use armament. Never saw him use conquerors actively.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm A-okay with giving Kid something like the Elbaf Spear, because it's something that's not genuinely,
It's not just giving him hockey.
Like, yeah, it's not just smacking on hockey on him and saying, "Oh yeah, Kid got stronger."
And
if
it's also
Kid masters a new technique and actually puts in the blood, sweat, and effort into doing it, then nobody's gonna complain, because it's like, yeah, he earned that move.
It's also something that is like one of Big Mom's best attacks.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's one of the, and we know multiple giants can use it, and it's one of those things that would aesthetically work really well with his punk rotten form, but we'll see how it goes, won't we? But yeah, any thoughts or ideas on the whole Saint J Garcia, aka Mr. Saturn?
I don't know why he's there if he isn't strong. It seems kind of stupid. I know you suggested that he could just be there to take over the Seraphim protocol, but it just seems like a massive risk. Unless I guess I suppose if it's like we got to take out the Sun God, then the risk might be worth it. It's just really weird because I never thought they would do anything. I thought unless they're really strong warriors, they will just not do anything.
I expected the only time they ever moved is when someone was in Marija fighting and everyone else was defeated.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's like you get to the boss room just before him, and then those five come at you.
Which, what if one of them go down here? What if Saturn goes down here?
Yeah.
That would leave a huge uproar in the world. And probably that would actually be a more devastating event than finding the One Piece itself in the eyes of the rest of the world. Like, as far as
if One Piece is going to go the way that I don't really want it to go and get really weird towards the end with all those like alien stuff, it could be, the Gorosei have weird alien powers, and he could just have some like crazy ability that just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't really track with the rest of the series.
what if the Gorosei are the inventors of the Rokushiki techniques?
Would be cool.
Five elders, 6 techniques, right? So it's like they are, whether or not they're like they could have been alive in the Void Century, may not have been. We've seen like they've not aged a day since we've ever seen them, right? But if they say the world perceives them as, because they're celestial dragons, it doesn't really matter. But they had like the immortality surgery performed on them and Im, but only they are made public, right? So it's like you've still got the World Summit with the Reverie and all the leaders where they can vote on stuff. So it's like, oh, we've still got democracy, but the Gorosei have always been there because they're such big staples in the world. You know what I mean? Yeah. They could have been the people to train the original CP0, and thus CP0 in turn trains the other CPs and so on and so forth, so that all those techniques are just like a trickle-down effect of their abilities. And they could arguably have, if they are like decrepitly old, they could arguably have some of the best haki we've ever seen, just out of sheer time to gain skill. Like, we may not have seen them move in 20, 30 years, but it doesn't mean that in the last 900 years they haven't been active, especially since half of them have got scars. And again, it's important to know only one of them that we see actually has a weapon. So they could have busted devil fruits, they could have busted Rokushiki, and busted haki just due to old age. It would be interesting, but at the same point in time, I don't think... it's hard. They don't necessarily need to be any stronger or weaker than certain things, if that makes sense. Like, Chapter 233, the world's greatest power, is when they're introduced, right? That world's greatest power, when they say the 5 elders, the supreme leaders of the world government, that could be being stated in the sense that it's like they're the political strongest, or that could be saying the world's greatest powers are actively like they're just that strong. You know what I mean? So it definitely is one of those like interesting ones. Because again, they also say like a couple chapters later when they next show up, that like Aokiji and the admirals are like the strongest weapons of the world government. You know what I mean? But then at the same point in time, they've got things that can, wipe out the Lucia Kingdom with the blink of an eye. So these guys could either be really strong or sort of just figureheads. It's really hard to tell what they are at the moment, though, because if they are really strong, I could see a heap of power creep coming our way that a lot of people aren't prepared for, that may piss off a lot of people's power scaling, right? Where the admirals are relative to the Yonko, but not just the admirals, the Gorosei and Kong. You know what I mean? And
yeah, that's the thing, is that like if these 5 Elder Stars are like he's kind of goofing on Luffy a little bit, that would be wild for the series, because now it's suddenly like,
there's
okay,
a huge power creep for a huge group of characters.
Yeah, it's like wild, because now it's like, okay, cool. So next we're gonna fight like Blackbeard, and then we're gonna fight like a series of admirals, and then it's like, okay, what, another like training with Garp? Like, how are we gonna bridge the gap? And I don't know, but yeah, because like thing is that the series could go on and still be really entertaining with Luffy already being pretty close to the top.
Yeah.
Just similar to how pre-Grand Line, like East Blue arc, was awesome. Realistically, Luffy was stronger than every enemy he came across before he met them. And even for a good portion of the Grand Line, he was stronger than basically every enemy he came across. At least like once he learned how to hit him. Like the only really problems he had was like, oh, I can't hit Crocodile. Oh look, now I can hit Crocodile and he wins. Like
It definitely
it
could
was
be one of those things
uh,
where it's like,
it was still a really good One Piece. Like the series was still really entertaining and it still felt really highly intense and cool. So like they could definitely have it so like, even if Luffy ends up being like kind of stronger than Blackbeard, like it's a hard fight, but he's like he doesn't have to get stronger in order to beat him like he has been having to do recently. That's still fine. It
it
would still be a really cool fight.
it could also be a matter of Luffy's close to the top, but there's a lot more people close to that same threshold that we didn't know existed, right? In that tier list, where it's like, okay, say the admirals aren't necessarily equal to the Yonko, right? They're a little bit under, right? You could have the 3 admirals a little bit under the Yonko, then the 4 Yonko, then like the fleet admiral Kong and the Gorosei sort of like scattered in between that same threshold. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the only thing is though, I would say to all of that in terms of the power creep and people being upset with it is how many people do you want to be at that tier come end of series? Because for someone to be at that tier that's not there now, you're gonna want people for them to overcome to reach that tier, right? So if you want Luffy there, that's fine. Luffy's almost there. If you want Zoro there, that's fine. Zoro's almost there, but he's still a fair way away compared to Luffy. But if you want like Kid, Law, like Sabo, all these other characters to be just as close, you're gonna need people in that same bracket for them to overcome to prove it.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So it comes down to like a double-edged sword there, where it's like it may feel like the market's being flooded with these strong opponents now, but it's like the Billionberry range. You know what I mean? When Billionberry was first dropped with Jack, it was like, oh, what? I remember back in the day, people thought that bloody Whitebeard's bounty was 1 bill. You know?
Yeah.
Now Jack isn't even top 20 or top 30 bounties. Do you know how wild that is?
Yeah.
But at that same point in time, it's like, although we have a heap of people that come after that have got like higher bounties than him, it's like it kind of came naturally. We haven't seen these guys do anything. If the admirals are so much stronger than him, and the fleet admirals are so much stronger than them, right? Why do they listen to them? And I'm not saying that to just try and justify that these guys are stronger. They could be weaker, but they could be close enough to be like, do you really think Akainu's going to take orders from someone that he could kick the ass of? Especially when they're
That's
making
true.
him look like a clown.
Yeah.
Like, he may do it to save face because he's not a piece of shit. But from our perspective, he's a piece of shit. So why wouldn't he? You know what I mean? So it raises like a hard thing where it's like, it's Schrodinger's cat for power scaling. All we need to do is see him do something, and then it's either gonna be there or it's not. You know what I mean? But it's
Yeah,
like
I get you.
it's one of those things as though where it's like nothing in the story contradicts it so far. So it's just like it's up in the air, and we're all just waiting on bated breath to be like, do something. You know? Do you guys think that Luffy's gonna hit this guy?
I don't know. I actually like don't know if I can see them getting into like confrontation. The thing is that like it's this arc is moving so much quicker than I think it's going to move every time. Like every
Yep.
time I say what I think is going to happen next chapter, it just like doesn't like I always think it's going to be like a bigger altercation, but the altercation just gets like ended right away and then we move on. So like I don't know if I want to put my money at this point on like Kizaru showing up, fighting people, him coming in, having a big dialogue, potentially fighting people, swapping. Like, I kind of feel like it's just going to be like, go, oh crap, those guys are over there. Oh no, the Seraphim are against us. Let's run away. And then they just kind of run away. Like, because I just can't see it happening, extending. I can't
So-
see this indication extending much.
Can I ask a question there then?
Yeah.
If it happens that way, the way you're just saying that, because you can't see it happening the other way, what would have changed between Sabity and here? We're still running away from an admiral.
Yeah, true, but I don't necessarily think they're. I don't know, because I mean, like they're kind of half running away from the CP0 agents.
Yep.
I think it's just the idea of like, Vegapunk is like, oh, let's get out of here, and they're like, oh, okay, we're gonna get out of here. You know what I mean? Not as a matter of like, we can't fight them, we will lose, we need to run. Like, I don't think it'll be like that.
Oh my
I think
god!
it'll just be, let's get out of here.
Oh my god! I'm an idiot.
Hmm?
Sorry, I just had a light bulb moment. Oh,
Right, you
okay.
finally realized, Kuma. You finally realized.
Last week, you know how I was talking about how Bonnie might see Im through the eyes of and memories of Kuma?
Yes.
We have we have a Gorosei member to confirm if she comes back and she's like, I saw this guy, Im.
Right.
He would shut that shit down.
So Bonnie dead, 2023.
Or Straw Hat starting a mini war here, because that could be what causes the altercation. Information.
Right.
You know what I mean? And he would be he would. It's perfect in the sense that he's here to give those orders, because we don't necessarily know if even the admirals know about them. So he can't exactly turn around and be like, he knows our secret leader, take him out. You know what I mean?
That case would essentially set in motion the entire rest of the series if this happened.
Yes.
It would basically mean, okay, we found out about this thing now. Oh my god, Im Im exists, and then Vegapunk doesn't know about it. Vegapunk's like, oh my god, that makes so much sense. That's why Dragon's so hellbent on taking out the bubble or whatever the hell. And they're like, we got to take him out. They fight that guy, start a war. Vegapunk's like, we got to gather allies and take over the world government. This is terrible. Let's go to Elbaf. I know people that can join us there. Suddenly they're like building an army, and like the end of the series is on the horizon.
Yeah. I mean, this is the final saga. I just
Quick.
it would be
Change
quick.
everything. I mean, like, if that happens, there's no point talking about what island are we going to go to next. It's like,
Well, the island would be Elbaf, wouldn't it? Which we all
Has
sort
to
of
be.
sit on.
that's like
But-
the ally island.
But do you know what the
basically.
problem would be there? Luffy defeats this Gorosei member, gets a huge spike in the bounty, but they also, essentially, when this guy comes to, is just like, we need a buster call on him 24/7.
Yeah.
So wherever they are in the world, which...
I mean, here's the thing, though. If Sun God Nika Joy Boy, who is the son of Dragon, etc., 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 all of that stuff, finds out about the existence of Im, and then beats an admiral and a Gorosei member, that is like, your bounty is higher than Dragon's now. You are the new #1 most wanted man.
Yeah.
Because while Dragon is actively trying to take out the world government, and maybe he knows about Im as well, and that's why his bounty's so high. Now, like, if he does, and he's
Yeah.
Joy Boy,
Yeah.
that is way worse.
Yeah. Or, say for argument's sake, Dragon doesn't know. Hence why Sabo telling him was like, wait, what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Say Sabo's still missing in action. Luffy finds out. Vegapunk starts trying to get Luffy. So, Luffy finds out. He finds out Luffy knows through Bonnie, right? They get into an altercation. Luffy decks this man. In the process of decking this man, Kizaru is like, I'm outnumbered. The Gorosei's down. My prerogative is to save him and get out. Right? You have a flip of Sabity where the world government made the Straw Hats separate and flee. Where the Straw Hats make the world government separate and flee. Right? Gorosei member comes to, blows up at Kizaru. Like, that was the wrong choice. Right? Goes back, informs the other elders and Im, and they start plotting to formulate an event to take out the Straw Hats, right? They start like, this is how we're going to take them out, you know what I mean? Meanwhile, we travel to Elbaf. Vegapunk's like, we need to get in contact with Dragon, we need to do this, we need to do this, and this. And Luffy's like, don't fucking tell me how to have my journey. Right? I pick what island we go to next. And he's like, but you don't understand, this would make the most logical sense. And the rest of the Straw Hats like, you don't need to try and use logic with him. Just tell him it'll be fun. And he's like, but it won't be fun, it'll be dangerous. And Luffy's like, ugh, I don't want to do it. Right?
Yeah.
Resulting in maybe Vegapunk being left at Elbaf with the Elbaf people to try and contact Dragon and get in touch with them. Only for Luffy to find out something's happened to Sabo. And that's what drags him into it. Because you know how we've always talked about how, like, even finding the One Piece and finding out the Void Sentry, all the terrible things the world government does, Luffy already knows enough about it. He grew up on it. And if him growing up with them being pieces of shit wasn't enough for him to, like, go try and start a war with them, what will make him start a war now?
Yeah, Luffy knows enough about the world government being like completely terrible that I mean that's the thing as well. Like if he goes to an island and he sees some like dictator leader who's like really bad to all the civilians, he'll beat the crap out of the dictator leader. He's like, everyone should be free.
Yeah.
You're not letting them be free. So like Luffy already knows that like.
But he's not actively
like,
trying to free the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that's not my whole entire life journey. He's kind of decided like I'm just gonna be free myself. I'm just gonna be the pirate king because like what's the benefit you get out of like trying to fight the entire world? It's like there's people that are like, you know, they so dislike society they like go out into a forest and live in like a cabin in the woods and just like hunt for themselves and stuff. It's
Okay.
Like, yeah, you can do that. You don't have to like shut down all of society. You can just go live in the woods.
Okay, the flip of that is, right? So that's happening on the Straw Hats front, narratively. What's happening with Weevil, right? What did Blackbeard go to Impel Down to do in the first place?
Impel Down
Yeah.
to get a crew.
Yeah. Who could fulfill that role post-time skip?
To go and get a crew.
From Impel Down.
I don't know. Be Mihawk?
Cross Guild.
Yeah.
They already have Crocodile who knows the layout of Impel Down.
Yeah.
Going for a former warlord with Weevil and a former warlord with Mihawk.
And Dofi.
And Dofi. Sorry, I was meant to say Dofi, not Mihawk. They could do a full-blown raid. Marco might actually go to them over going to like the Straw Hats and that to try and get Weevil back. Because they're a mercenary guild as far as we're aware, right?
Yeah.
He might go to them and like go with Bucket and be like, she'll pay. She'll pay to get him back. Even if it's a lie. You know what I mean?
It'd be pretty funny if the Cross Guild actually got like super, super, super powerful. But then right at the end when like Luffy's like, okay, now we're going to try to take over the world government.
Ooh.
He goes to them and he's like, join us. And they're like, no, we fucking hate you. It's like all of Luffy's enemies.
Well, actually, do you know what I think is going to end up happening with the Cross Guild? And I did a TikTok on this, right? I think the strong combatants of Cross Guild are going to eventually go down this and that, like different plans, different mindsets, different agendas, yeah? And the person that's going to take down the last two members is going to be Kobe. He's going to capture Buggy and Alvida. And he'll get the infamy of the hero of the Marines, the new hero of the Marines. And be viewed...
He took out, like, the leader
of the Cross Guild. And be viewed as a Yonko-level combatant, even though he isn't, because Buggy's not. And it'll also be full circle, because his character was introduced as being too scared and too weak to do anything to defend himself against Alvida, to bringing her in personally and stopping her evil throughout the world. And we know that Buggy's not all that strong, but he's like semi-competent in like a really low tier way, whereas Kobe's actually become semi-competent. You know what I mean?
I can't wait to see Kobe just being an absolute freaking beast.
But it would also make a lot of sense because if
Man,
Kobe's,
to correct their asses.
but it would also make a lot of sense because
Just Chad.
if Kobe never actually does become a super beast, the only thing he can really do is take down Buggy and Alvida, isn't it?
Yeah. Actually, I want to see new stuff from Buggy too. Cause come on, he's had so much time to just tinker around with new weapons. The guy has to be loaded at this point, right?
Also on the flip of that, I can't wait for the day that End of Series Helmeppo achieves the rank of captain, and we see him bring in Captain Morgan because we know Captain Morgan escaped the Marines. And you get a moment where, because Django is now part of the Marines and is also the same rank as Helmeppo, right? Django is like, oh, Captain Morgan, oh, I'm sorry, I hypnotized that guy to be a villain. And you get a redemption arc for Captain Morgan where Django unhypnotizes him and he can actually be a good dad to Helmeppo again, and he's proud that Helmeppo achieved the same rank as him.
I think it would be like really ironic. You know how Helmeppo has like dual wield swords?
Yep.
I think it'd be cool if he learned like the flower sword style
Techniques.
that like Vista does.
I mean, if everyone
And-
had the flower sword style, it would be fucking sexy.
Yeah. But I just mean because the whole dynamic between Helmeppo and his dad is that his dad was born like Helmeppo has like naturally like feminine features, or not like masculine, hyper masculine features. Like he's got the butt chin and he's got the long blonde flowy hair and stuff like that. And so because of that, like Axan Morgan also had those features.
Yep.
And so but he had like this crazy like masculinity complex where he shaved his head and then he friggin'
Do you know where
sorted
that
like a metal jaw onto
Do you know
him.
where that masculinity complex came from, though?
Oh, where?
Django.
Right, because he hypnotized him.
Kuro was the Morgan was the only Marine that Kuro didn't one-shot kill because he was a little bit stronger than the other Marines, right?
Mm.
So Django hypnotized him to believe he was strong enough to have captured Kuro himself to take the credit for Kuro, so Kuro faked his bounty being claimed. So Morgan, so like in like Morgan's able to do projectile slashes and shit like that, right?
Oh.
That's something that we don't see from Zoro until Zoro's fighting captains later on in the story. You know what I mean? And Zoro photorized Morgan, yeah, but it's like we saw that Django was able to hypnotize people to make them strong enough to like destroy cliff faces.
Yeah.
I would say Morgan was just an average ass Marine that got hypnotized to believe his own hype, and that's what made him a bad guy.
Would be interesting.
And I know it's like a really random plotline, but imagine how end of story that could come back with like a small epilogue with like Helmeppo gets to the rank of captain since he's only a lieutenant at the moment, and him and Django undo the damage they did to Morgan, and it's like actually like a bit of a touching moment for them at the end. Meanwhile, Kobe is able to have captured Alvida, and like Alvida's like almost crushing on Kobe at that point in time, the way she crushed on Luffy, because Kobe was able to beat her, you know? And like, imagine it, the legend of Buggy, the apprentice of Gold Roger, brother of Shanks, rival of Luffy, the man that freed Impel Down, the man that challenged Whitebeard, the man that became a warlord and then founded the Cross Guild, brought in by just a kid from the East Blue. I don't know. I just think it's like it would be beautiful in that regard, and like
I just think like it would. I think it would work really well if like the idea that like Axan Morgan was so hardcore about his like masculinity, and then he ends up getting captured by his son, who he kind of resented for embracing
that
his
femininity.
the femininity that he had, and the way that the son beats him is by using like a flower sword technique, you know, like, oh, I'm just all, and he's like dancing around and like using like flower attacks, and then Axan Morgan is like, yeah, man, and then he's just getting wrecked by his own son. That'd be just pretty good little icing on the cake.
I don't know. We're at the stage now where we've got to like, even though it's the final saga, and I think this is going to take a long time, we've got to see how this is going to end in a lot of ways. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And I don't know. It feels like we're sort of coming full circle in a lot of those regards, in a weird way. I don't know. I'm waiting, and I'm curious to see some of those things that come out like that. Like, the moment we see Brooke meet Laboon, I'm going to be in tears. Again, I want Helmepper to bring in Morgan. I'm going to be in tears. Kobe, if he actually catches Alvida. And again, at this point in time, she's got the reputation of essentially being a Yonko commander. You know? So it's like, it is like an impressive thing to do. It's just not like, it's not god tier impressive, if that makes sense.
I mean, like, let's be fair though to Alvida. She had no fruit and no haki, so
Yeah.
she got friggin' smashed. But now she has a fruit, and she is actually, like, as far as we could tell, probably fairly hardworking. Like, she's an aggressive pirate. Like, she was like beating up guys with her raw strength, and she's like, "I'm the strongest woman on the seas." Like, she was like
she had some meat
aggressive
and
and
potatoes to her.
yeah, like she wanted to push hard on the strength. It wouldn't surprise me if she's actually like over these last few years like pushed hard on her strength, developed like learned how to fight really well, developed like some basic haki and stuff. Like it could actually be pretty decent, and her devil fruit is solid.
Even if she's not, like, you got Buggy, Mihawk, Crocodile, Daz Bones. It's like, she'd be like the 4th or 5th commander of a group. Arguably, you could argue that she's over or under Moji and Kabaji. Right?
Mr. 3 as well.
Mr. 3, like, you could argue she's, like, any of those people are sort of interchangeable with each other. You know? Like,
Yeah.
it could be, what? Let's just go for strength, right? You got Mihawk, Crocodile, Buggy, Mr. 3, Alvida, Moji, Kabaji, and then, like, not to mention, like, all the Impel Down characters that they had working for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Like,
They're all level 1 and 2 prisoners, right?
more than that. I think they were level 3 and above.
Oh, level 3 as well. Okay.
Oh, maybe. Because they all blended in and mixed in with each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, like, they have some interesting and impressive people under their belt. Plus, they're, like, semi-strong and they've been pretty active in the New World. And it's like, they are weak. I'd say they're the weakest out of any of those organizations. But it's like, although they're the weakest, it's like, they've got some broken abilities. Like, dude, name too many people that are actually bypassing Alvida's slip ability. That aren't a, like, relatively strong character.
Yeah. Wouldn't put up against like standard soldiers and fodder. She pretty much just cakewalks.
Her base ability makes her, like, the top tier level of Khalifa.
I mean, you could even argue that like if someone has haki, still slips off.
Yeah. You'd need, like, Rio to, like, hurt them without touching them to do
Yeah,
it.
or just like
Area of effect attacks.
sized swings. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even that, we saw buildings hit her, and the buildings flung off her.
Yeah, true. It was pretty ridiculous.
Like, anything that she doesn't want to touch her just goes ding!
Her power awaken would be the most annoying crap to deal with.
Oh, dude.
Zero friction on the ground.
Oh.
Impossible to stay upright.
Which, sorry, speaking of, we may get Kizaru's awakening in this arc. Like, even with the Celestial Dragon here. You know what I mean? Wait,
Kizaru. Ooh.
hang on. Saturn's got
I
a...
don't know if the admirals have to be awakened.
Well, I would say they're more likely to be awakened than the fucking Yonko at this point.
I mean, the Yonko already have been.
I mean, we haven't seen them technically be awakened, have we? We're just theorized of it. We've never actually been told that.
Yeah, true.
Dude, you know the rings of Saturn?
Yeah.
Imagine, because we've got Saturn here, a combo attack of him and Kizaru. And Kizaru acts as, like, the rings of Saturn shooting meteors down with the blade, like with the Yakasaki no Sacred Jewels.
Can we call it Saturn Disco Ball? That would be a cool team attack.
That would. There's so many cool ideas that could happen.
And
with
I'm
this
reading
list.
through this wiki on Alvita, and it said she was acting captain of the crew during Buggy's time in Impel Down. Was she not in Impel Down with him?
No. She
No,
never
she
got
was not.
captured. Only Buggy got caught out of the crew.
Okay.
She was actually in the Calm Belt. Or near the Calm Belt, near Amazon Lily, just chilling. She actually passed Boa and Boa's ship heading to Impel Down.
Right.
But okay, so she's over them, but that was also before Mr. 3 joined the crew. So you got
That's true.
Buggy, Mr. 3, Daz Bones, Croc, and Mihawk, plus anyone else.
Buggy and
strong
Mr.
with him.
3 were in level 3.
Buggy and Mr. 3?
In level 3, Starvation Hell.
So they did. Yeah, no. Buggy was on level 1, but made it
Yeah, Buggy
down
was
to
on
level
level
3.
Okay, hang on. I should
So
look
Mr.
into that.
3 was in Starvation Hell. So yeah, because okay, so
Yep, true. Because his bounty was so low is why.
yeah, because Buggy had 15 mil and Mr. 3 had 25 mil at the time.
Oh, 25? I thought it was... Wait. Mr. 3. I didn't know that. I thought it was... For some reason, I thought it was higher than that.
Oh, maybe he beat someone with a 50
Yeah,
mil
no,
bounty.
sorry. Yeah, it is 24 million.
He low key though, he had a small bounty because he was actually a loan shark. He wasn't actually like a criminal. And he's beaten people with 50 mil bounties very easily. So, in terms of his strength, he's probably over 50 mil. He's just not done anything at that point in time. Because you got him...
Mr. 3 is probably 60 million.
Yeah, well... Okay, that's hard. So, it's like... Mr. 1 was 75 mil. Mr. 3 was 32 mil. Right? Mr. 3 at 32 mil was beating pretty much all the Baroque Works members, but he lost very easily to Hina. But at that point in time, Hina was a captain with the Devil Fruit.
Yeah.
But in Impel Down, you got to think he was also like absolutely demolishing the jail, like the wild beasts on the wild beast level.
Like, Mr. 3 also, I mean, if...
He was relative to Sanji.
Unawakened Devil Fruit, Mr. 3's wax would have been probably the most efficient deterrent to it.
Well, Bon Clay was like relative to Sanji, so it's like they were lower in bounty than they should be because they were so close to the beginning of the Grand Line, and they weren't actively making names for themselves because they were trying to be a secret organization. You know what I mean? The only people that weren't completely secret was Daz Bones because he was an assassin from one of the Blues, but even he wasn't like, they weren't aware that he was on the Grand Line. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because like, Mr. 3 wasn't all that bad. And actually, you know what? I've probably got it up here. I've got a list.
To infiltrate, what is it? Marine Ford.
I got a list of everyone's bounties here. So 32 was Bon Clay's, right? So Galdino's was 24 mil, not 25 mil. So Galdino shares his bounty with Lola, Foxy. Mont Blanc Cricket had a bounty of 25 mil. Demaro Black, which is the fake Straw Hats, had a bounty of 26 mil. Miss Golden Week, who was Galdino's partner, who was weaker than him, had a bounty of 29 mil. Gladius has a bounty of 21. And then Bon Clay had a bounty of 32. Right? Miss Doublefinger had a bounty of 35 mil, which she probably... wouldn't Miss Doublefinger have beaten Bon Clay? Probably. Right?
Maybe? I don't know.
That's a hard one, because we were told at the time that the male and female partners were supposed to be as strong as each other.
Yeah.
but none of them were.
None of them really were.
Yeah. But yeah, like if you keep going up that line, you got like Miss Doublefinger at 35 mil, Bobby Funk at 36 mil, Mikazuki, which was a dude that got low diff by Rob Lucci, like literally one shot by Rob Lucci in Water 7. You have Shoju, who is one of the ape guys. You've got Saki's at 38 mil, Boa's sisters at 40 mil, Roshio at 42, Lafayette at 42, Pinkbeard at 52, Kelly Funk at 57, and then we get to like Senior Pink, Lao G, Van Orga, Suleiman, Doc Q, Gyro, Daz Bones, and stuff like that. So like, it's a bit hard. Like I've got a huge list at the moment of all the bounties. It's odd because it's like one of those things where it's like, we know that bounties aren't a direct level of strength, but they also can indicate strength. It's just they get like covered up with narrative, you know? By the way, fun fact, at this point in the story, there's only 144 confirmed bounties.
That's actually kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, it's
Not
like,
even 200, dang.
yeah, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it does. You know what I mean? But yeah. Is there any predictions for the next chapter in your guys' minds?
Next chapter after this,
Yeah.
I would say we are, if not, like 1 or 2 chapters away from finally departing the island.
I would say we are at like the 3/4 mark. So notice how we've got no conflict at this point, because Kaku and Lucci are down and the Seraphim have been ordered by Vegapunk. So we literally are past conflict for the minute. Does that not sort of like reminisce like the calm before the storm when we got out of the auction house when Kizaru was first showing up in Sabati and we were all at like Rayleigh's bar and he's just like, we've just got to lay low for a couple of days. And then shit hit the fan? I feel like we've been in this arc now, what? It's chapter 1073. We've been here for almost... Have we been here for almost 20 chapters already? Hang on. Not 20 chapters, but... It's 1070. So 1050 was the end of Wano. Right? Around the end of Wano. 1053 was like the new emperors. Then you had the break with the Road to Laugh Tale. And 1054 and onwards we started getting out of Wano. Right? With 1057 being the final chapter of Wano. So we've only been in this arc for not even 2 volumes yet. Right? I would argue that it's probably going to be a 2 to 3 volume arc. So I would say we've got like another 10 chapters in the arc. I would say next chapter, we're going to be trying to get our shit together and finding where Vegapunk is. And what's end up going to happen is we're going to start getting Bonnie with the flashback with Kuma. Right? By the time that finishes, Kizaru will have arrived at the island with the Gorosei. That's what I've... Whether that's next chapter directly or whether or not that's over the next couple of weeks. That's sort of where I'm leaning at the minute. If that makes sense.
I can see that.
I don't think we're getting anything more with Marco for a couple of chapters. Like,
Nah,
I
don't
reckon,
think so.
I reckon in 5 or 7 chapters we'll get Marco again. Like a little breakaway. Maybe when this arc finishes, actually. If that makes sense. Although, with her saying, why don't you go ask Vegapunk? Is she going to drag him to Vegapunk to get that confirmed for him to go help Weevil? Or is Marco just going to bypass that altogether because Marco's not a dick? Like, you get what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, we've only just got rid of Marco. Are we really going to bring Marco back into this? And if that's the case, ugh. What if Marco just turns around and doesn't help her?
I mean, yeah, because Marco knows that she's kind of been hacking apart his friends.
Yeah. Marco just may be like, that's a you problem, love.
Yeah, I'm tired.
Also, actually, really odd thing here. Miss Buckingham's sunglasses, you know how she doesn't have the sides that go over her ears? Like, they're just sort of almost like contacts. Yeah? Isn't that the same glasses that Green Bull has?
It's a fashion trend.
Silly. Yeah, I don't know at this point in time.
Oh, you know what would be funny? Maybe like Green Bull like broke her glasses and then he took his pair off and then gave it to her. Like just had to add salt in the wound.
That'd be funny. But yeah, I don't know how this is gonna play out at this point. I've got ideas based on how I think it'll parallel, but it's hard. It's hard. We just need a little bit more info. You know what I mean? Anyway, you guys, any theories, any predictions for the next chapter? Otherwise, we've been going for over 2 hours and 40 minutes at this point, so we'll get close to wrapping up the stream. I gotta go to the toilet.
I've got
all
no
good.
theories. I don't know.
Don't know.
Keen for next chapter.
Keen for next chapter. We'll try and organize the top 50 stream when we can soon. Also, I haven't started it yet, but I bought One Piece Odyssey this week. I'll be starting my playthrough of it on Twitch. I'll be dropping the links to when I start doing those lives on the Discord. So if you want to hang by and watch that sort of stuff this week, be sure to check that shit out. I'll be posting the link in the Discord, like I said. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We're so close to hitting our goal of 150 subscribers. Getting really close there. At the moment, we're almost halfway to our goal of 1,000 followers on TikTok as well. Sitting a little over 460 followers on there at the moment. So check out all that stuff. The link for that is in the link tree down below, so you can click on that link, look at the Discord, the Twitch, the Twitter, TikTok, all that good stuff, and of course the YouTube there. That being said, guys, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
See yous. Until the next chapter of One Piece, or until the next video of mine you watch, whatever it is you're here for. Peace. Nothing but love, nothing but respect. Have a damn good day. Goodbye.